Chapter 271. At this moment, Tian Li's imposing manner was exceptionally overbearing and powerful. She used to be all smiles and welcome guests from all over the world because those guests came to her door to give her money. But now, offending the boss was more serious than offending her. She was an elite personally trained by Gu Yin. She was once sent abroad for 5 years of life and death training. It could be said that the number of people who died in her hands was at least in the triple digits. Her usual amiable and approachable appearance was just a disguise she put on. "I'll give you a chance. Scram now and tell your elders to come to my everlasting feast hall to apologize. Otherwise, your fate will not be much better than the two of them." With a frightened look on his face, Du Yang desperately gulped down his saliva. He looked at the more than 20 big men rolling on the ground, and then looked at the 6 big men brought by Tian Li. After a moment of silence, he slowly said, "Since I've provoked a big trouble, I'm afraid only the elders of my family can come forward. As for whether I'll go to your place to apologize or not, it's not up to me. Farewell." In the nearby building, Qi Chongqing was dumbfounded as he looked at the more than 20 big men being beaten up. He then looked at Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, who were beaten up again. He also knew Tian Li, but he didn't expect her to have such a cold side. He had seen the 6 big men before. They were the security guards of the Everlasting Feast Hall. But he didn't expect that these 6 security guards would have such powerful skills. How long did they take just now? Half a minute. Half a minute at most. 6 people actually beat up more than 20 people in just half a minute. Could it be that they were special forces retired from the army? At this moment, Qi Chongqing suddenly felt deeply glad that he didn't get involved in this matter. Otherwise, wouldn't he have been beaten up at this moment? However, Tian Li actually dared to beat up Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. Could it be that the Everlasting Feast Hall isn't afraid of the Jiang Group and Wanyuan Real Estate's retaliation? You must know that these 2 forces are much more powerful than the Everlasting Feast Hall. Qi Chongqing was somewhat puzzled. On the street below, Tian Li indifferently said, "Take the 2 of them away. If you can still get up, immediately scram back to your master, and tell him to come to my Everlasting Feast Hall to pick you up. Tell them that if they don't arrive at the Everlasting Feast Hall within 2 hours, I can't guarantee that these 2 guys will still have their limbs intact." Saying that, she waved her hand at the 2 traffic policemen who were quietly watching from afar, but had yet to come over. "Hello." The 2 traffic policemen hesitated for a moment, and finally chose to come over. "I believe you have investigated this traffic accident clearly," said Tian Li lightly. "Remember, don't play dumb with me. Don't think that just because of these 2 brats' background, I won't treat them fairly. Send someone to tow the car away. Someone will contact your team later." "All right." The 2 traffic policemen subconsciously looked at the 6 burly men, and quickly nodded in agreement. At 6 o'clock in the evening, within the Rainbow Auction House, there were already a few hundred guests that had come to participate in today's auction. As the doors of the venue closed, most of the bright lights inside were extinguished. On the auction stage, a bright beam of light shone. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." A young girl wearing a cheongsam and light makeup slowly walked to the auction stage. With a bright smile on her face, she said, "Everyone, are you surprised? You didn't expect that I would be the auctioneer hosting today's auction. As a matter of fact, when I became a singer, I also worked as an auctioneer for a foreign auction for half a year. I have a certificate." Ha ha ha. "I never thought that a big star would host today's auction. It seems that the auction house has spent a lot of money. Wow, this girl is really getting more and more beautiful. It turns out that she's also an auctioneer." In the seats below, Tan Xiu looked a bit surprised. He didn't expect that he would come across an acquaintance in an auction in Hong Kong. And this acquaintance was none other than Zhang Xinya, who borrowed his cell phone, owed him money, and even asked him for help. It was undeniable that Zhang Xinya was very beautiful tonight. She was not inferior to Ouyang Lulu, Kong Xia, and Mu Weining. With a smile, Zhang Xinya gently raised her white-gloved hand and said with a smile, "I know that everyone is here for the treasure today. I won't waste any more time. Now let me announce the start of today's auction. The first item to be auctioned is a set of ceramic tea set from the Ming Dynasty. It is said that this ceramic tea set is an imperial item from the imperial palace. Friends who like to collect and enjoy the tea ceremony shouldn't miss such a good thing. The starting price is 5 million, and each increment must be no less than 100,000. The bidding begins now. Immediately, many people below began to bid. 1 million. 5 million. In just a few minutes, the price of this ceramic tea set from the Ming dynasty had been raised to 8 million. In the end, this ceramic tea set was bought by an old man for 8 million. Zhang Xinya smiled and said, "Congratulations, friend number 0246. You can go backstage now or wait until the auction is over. Now let's proceed to the second item. The auction was in full swing under Zhang Xinya's hosting. Zhang Xinya's eloquence was very good, and she was able to incite everyone's emotions. Therefore, almost every item was auctioned at a very high price. 2 hours later, after auctioning an antique calligraphy and painting, Zhang Xinya said with a smile, "The next item to be auctioned is a mysterious ore. This mysterious ore is very peculiar. Even the appraisal masters of our auction house have no way to identify its origin. What I can tell you is that this ore has a magical effect. No matter who wore it, they would feel a sense of tranquility in their hearts. It's even very comfortable. Originally, a big boss of the auction house wanted to keep this ore. But after all, it was entrusted to us for auction, so we can only take it out. If that big boss wants it, I'm afraid he'll have to buy it through the auction. Its starting price is 1 million, and each increment must be no less than 100,000. Now the bidding begins." At this moment, Tan Xiu's spiritual sense had already broken out of his body, and quickly wrapped the ore on the tray in front of Zhang Xinya. Along with the faint feeling, he had determined that this was indeed a piece of soul tranquilizer stone. Moreover, it was a top-grade soul tranquilizer stone. Earth must have a deep connection with the immortal world. Otherwise, it's impossible for Earth to have so many treasures in the immortal world. Tan Xiu silently pondered. He didn't immediately bid but waited for others to bid. He had participated in auctions before, and was well aware that those who really wanted to buy the things they fancied would only start bidding at the end. 1 million. 2 million. Along with the two guests' bids, the venue fell into silence. Zhang Xinya was not discouraged after seeing this situation. Instead, she said with a smile, "As the saying goes, ancient jade can nourish people. Our auction house's appraisers unanimously believe that this ore can also nourish people. Therefore, I hope everyone will actively bid for it. After all, things that are beneficial to one's body are really rare." As her voice faded away, some guests immediately bid. As soon as she finished speaking, some of the guests below immediately made a bid. 8 million. 5 million. 8 million. In just a few minutes, the price had been raised to 8 million. It was 8 times higher than the base price. Finally, at this time, the number of people who participated in the bidding decreased a lot. Only 2 or 3 people were still bidding. Tan Xiu turned to Ji Qimei and nodded. Immediately after, Ji Qimei raised the plate in her hand and said in a deep voice, 10 million. 11 million. A voice sounded. 20 million. Ji Qimei raised her plate again. 50 million. The other party said again in a deep voice. At the same time, the old man who bid also turned his head from the front row and looked at Ji Qimei. With an indifferent expression, Ji Qimei raised her plate again and said, 100 million. The old man's complexion slightly changed and a vexed look appeared in his eyes. After a moment of silence, he raised his plate and said, 200 million. Ji Qimei raised her plate and said, 500 million. Immediately, the entire venue was in an uproar. Everyone looked at Ji Qimei. Originally, no one cared much about this ore. The base price was only 1 million, but in just a short time, it unexpectedly rose to 500 million. It was the first time that such a large amount of money had appeared in the auction. The most incredible thing was that the current bidding price was no longer a few 100,000 or a few million, but 100 million. Could it be that this stone is really a treasure? Many people secretly guessed. At this moment, the old man revealed a wry smile. Many people knew him. He was a wealthy big boss in Hong Kong, the big boss of the entertainment industry, Gu Weidong. At the same time, Gu Weidong was also one of the bosses of the Tianhong auction house. He didn't expect that someone would pay such a high price to compete with him for a piece of strange, or that he was determined to get 500 million. It was nothing to him, but he could see that the other party was determined to get it. Therefore, he was very clear that even if he raised the price again, the other party would still bid higher than him. Perhaps, he would even become enemies with the other party because of this bidding. Forget it. It seemed that he had no fate with this or. Gu Weidong shook his head and gave up the idea of continuing to bid. At this time, Zhang Xinya's eyes didn't look at Ji Qimei. She looked at the source of the voice and saw Tan Xiao sitting below. She didn't expect that she would see Tan Xiao here. When she found that Tang Xiao was also looking at her, the smile on her face turned brighter. She nodded to Tang Xiao imperceptibly and smilingly said, "It seems that there's someone with a discerning eye who can recognize a gem. Number 0125 has bid 500 million. Is there anyone higher than 500 million? If not, this precious or belongs to number 0125. The second watch has arrived. Can the third watch be far away? Where are the recommendation votes and monthly votes?" Chapter 272. In the auction venue, hundreds of guests who came to participate in the auction fell into silence. Buying in or at a price of more than 500 million made them feel that it was not worth it. Everyone looked at Ji Qimei with a somewhat strange expression. Even more so, many people cursed inwardly. Is this the rhythm of rich people becoming stupid? As the auctioneer, Zhang Xinya found that no one wanted to increase the price, so she immediately said with a smile, "Since no one wants to increase the price, then this or belongs to friend 0125. Do you want to go backstage now? Or do you want to go backstage after the auction ends?" Now, Ji Qimei got up and slightly nodded to Tan Xiao before leaving her seat. However, she bowed and nodded, causing most people's eyes to shift to Tan Xiao. Even Zhang Xinya, who was in front of the auction stage, looked surprised. She had inquired about Tan Xiao from her best friend, Ouyang Lulu. Although Ouyang Lulu didn't say much, the tip of the iceberg made her secretly shocked. The auction went on as usual. A few minutes later, Ji Qimei returned with the soul tranquilizer stone. After handing it over to Tan Xiao, she asked in a low voice, "Venerable Lord, we've got the thing we want to buy. Should we leave now or stay here?" Tan Xiao thought for a while and said, "Take the soul tranquilizer stone and leave first. Tell On to send you off. I'll stay here to see if there are any good things." "Understood," Ji Qimei replied. She looked at Tan Xiao and looked at the soul tranquilizer stone a few times before handing it back to her. Just as she was about to leave, she suddenly recalled something and quickly took out a bank card. She handed it to Tan Xiao and said, "Venerable Lord, there's still 9.5 billion in here. If there's anything you like, just buy it." Tan Xiao didn't refuse since he indeed didn't have any money. After receiving it and watching Ji Qimei leave, he secretly sighed inwardly. Ji Qimei was sensible. Money was just a worldly possession. He didn't care about money, but cultivation resources were in short supply. He also needed a lot of resources to train a group of confidants. It would be inconvenient for him to do a lot of things if he didn't have money. Had it been before, he would have felt a bit awkward taking the everlasting feast hall's money. But now he didn't have such a feeling. After all, the materials he gave to Ji Qimei to refine pills were priceless treasures. However, 2 minutes after Ji Qimei left, Zhang Xinya, who was on the auction stage, said with a smile, "The next item to be auctioned is a millennium-old ginseng. As far as I know, a few months ago, Jingmen Island held an auction and auctioned a millennium wild ginseng. Including this one, only 2 appeared this year. In addition, in the past 3 years, there were no auctions in the country where a 1,000-year-old savage was auctioned. The base price of this 1,000-year-old wild ginseng was 100 million, and each increment must be no less than 5 million. Let the bidding begin." Tan Xiao's eyes lit up. He hadn't seen the list of items to be auctioned, so he didn't know what else was in this auction apart from the soul-calming stone. When his divine sense instantly enveloped the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng on the tray, his expression changed slightly. A 3,000-year-old wild ginseng? After making a judgment, Tan Xiu quickly grabbed his mobile and dialed Mo On's number. Boss. Mo On's voice came from the phone. Tell Ji Qimei to come back, said Tan Xiu in a deep voice. Understood. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiu's eyes were firmly locked on the 3,000-year-old wild ginseng. 150 million. After a few seconds of silence, someone directly raised the price by 50 million. Many people present knew that person. He was the Hong Kong Glasses King, Ke Jintao. 160 million. Although many people knew Ke Jintao, 1,000-year-old wild ginseng was also a treasure that many people were determined to get. Therefore, they didn't want to be modest at this time. 200 million. Ke Jintao raised the price again. 210 million. 250 million. 260 million. 270 million. As more than a dozen people continued to raise the price of the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng kept rising. In just 5 or 6 minutes, the price had broken through 350 million. The one who raised the price was still Ke Jintao. Tan Xiu looked at Ji Qimei, who returned to her seat next to him and lightly said, "We're now auctioning a wild ginseng. No matter how high the price is, we must get it. It will be very beneficial to Yin Air." Ji Qimei's expression changed and quickly asked, "Lord, what's the current price?" 350 million. Ji Qimei nodded and raised her number plate, shouting, 500 million. Wow! Along with Ji Qimei's call, the entire auction venue was in an uproar. Hundreds of rich people who came to participate in the auction whispered to each other, "Who's that old lady? She spent 500 million to buy a stone before, and now she raised the price by 150 million. Does she have the money to burn? The value of that 1,000-year-old wild ginseng is at most 1 or 200 million, right? But she's willing to spend 500 million to buy it. How extravagant! Who is she? Why haven't I seen her before? Send someone to investigate her. We must investigate her identity and background before the auction ends. There's going to be a good show today. I don't want to spend 500 million to buy a 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. So I give up." 600 million. In the back corner of the venue, an old man wearing reading glasses and a Chinese tunic suit suddenly raised the number plate in his hand. When everyone looked at the old man, their complexion greatly changed. Li Jiren? No one thought that the one who raised the bid was actually Li Jiren. No one knew when Li Jiren came to the auction venue. Tan Xiu turned his head. When he saw Li Jiren, his brows slightly wrinkled. He didn't know many super-rich people in Hong Kong, but he knew Li Jiren. After all, he often saw the photos of this legendary richest man in Asia. Ji Qimei turned her head and glanced at the back. Then, she raised the number plate in her hand again and said in a deep voice, 1 billion. What? All the guests in the auction venue were dumbfounded. They didn't expect that Ji Qimei would dare to compete with Li Jiren for the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. Moreover, she raised the price by 400 million. In the back row, Li Jiren was also surprised. He also didn't expect that someone would raise the price to 1 billion for a 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. He originally thought that his bid of 600 million to buy the 1,000-year-old wild ginseng was already in the bag. After a moment of silence, he raised the number plate in his hand again and lightly said, 1 billion. 2 billion. Ji Qimei didn't care about money. Even if she had to throw money, she still wanted to buy that 3,000-year-old wild ginseng. After all, there weren't many things that were beneficial to her master. Once there was one, let alone spending money to buy it. Even if she had to rob it or even kill it, she would go all out. Li Jiren stared blankly and then shook his head. He was indeed rich. 2 billion was just a small amount of money to him, but it was not worth it to buy a 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. He was a businessman. He had his own standards for spending money. He wouldn't compete with others to buy things that were not worth it. Hundreds of rich people in the auction venue didn't know what to say at this moment. They looked at Ji Qimei with a strange expression. No one thought that Ji Qimei would dare to compete with Li Jiren after seeing him. They didn't expect that she would raise the price by 900 million all of a sudden, making the wild ginseng's price reach 2 billion. Zhang Xinya was also shocked at this moment. She didn't expect that the price of a 1,000-year-old wild ginseng would be increased to 2 billion. She originally thought that the price of this wild ginseng would reach 500 million, which was already the limit. But now it seemed that it was 4 times more than what she expected. However, she was still somewhat happy inside. According to her agreement with the auction house, she could get a 1,000th commission for every item auctioned. If the auctioned item could reach 10 times the base price, she would get a 2,000th commission. Tonight, just the commission alone should be no less than 8 digits, right? Zhang Xinya thought happily in her heart. Then, seeing that Li Jiren didn't increase the price, she said, "Is there a higher bid? If not, this 1,000-year-old wild ginseng will belong to friend 0125. She asked several times. Seeing that no one spoke, Zhang Xinya immediately knocked the mallet and said with a smile, "Congratulations to friend 0125 for obtaining this 1,000-year-old wild ginseng. Would you like to go backstage to trade now? Or do you want to go backstage after the auction is over?" Now, Ji Qimei stood up and bowed to Tan Xiu again before leaving her seat. Tan Xiu didn't intervene in the following auction. At 10 p.m., the auction was over. As the guests got up and prepared to leave, Zhang Xinya took off her white gloves with a beaming smile and came before Tan Xiu. Her eyes glanced at Ji Qimei before she extended her hand to Tan Xiu and said with a smile, "We meet again, Mr. Tang." Tan Xiu nodded. He found that many people around were looking at her, so he immediately said, "Has your relative's illness been cured? I heard from Chen Jizhong that he has found the medicinal herbs you need." Zhang Xinya nodded repeatedly and gratefully said, "It's been cured. Thank you, Mr. Tang. If it weren't for you, Tan Xiu raised his hand to interrupt her. He then turned to look at Ji Qimei and said, "Let An escort you to the Victoria port. Immediately return to Jingmen Island and put away this wild ginseng. Wait for me to come back and give Yan Er the medicine." Understood. With respect on her old face, Ji Qimei complied and left with Mo An. Mo An stood beside Tan Xiu like a javelin. Zhang Xinya was surprised as she looked at Ji Qimei's departing back. When she retracted her gaze, she curiously asked, "Tan Xiu, do you know that old lady? From your conversation with her, it seems like the relationship between you two." "She's my subordinate," Tan Xiu calmly said. Chapter 273. Zhang Xinya looked at Tan Xiu with a dumbfounded expression, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Even her heartbeat was several beats faster than before. His subordinate? The old man who shocked the audience and splashed out billions of yuan without even giving face to Li Jiren turned out to be Tang Xiu's subordinate? In other words, the person who bought the ore and the wild ginseng was actually Tan Xiu's subordinate? Tan Xiu was a bit amused as he looked at Zhang Xinya. He found that Zhang Xinya's dumbfounded expression was actually very cute, especially her black and bright eyes. Her sluggish charm made her look like a cute kitten in a daze. Suddenly, Tan Xiu's expression slightly moved as he asked with a smile, "Do you have anything else to do later?" Zhang Xinya gulped and woke up from her daze. She shook her head and said, "I'm done hosting the auction. I have nothing else to do." "Are you familiar with Hong Kong?" asked Tan Xiu. "Of course I'm familiar with it. I'm actually a Hong Kong native," said Zhang Xinya. "Are you free now?" Tan Xiu asked with a smile. "This is my first time coming to Hong Kong, and I'm leaving tomorrow. I haven't had the time to wander around. It's getting late now, so let's find a place to have some supper first. How about it? You're leaving tomorrow?" Zhang Xinya was surprised. "Yeah, I'm going abroad to do something," answered Tan Xiu. "Wait for me. I'm going to the back to get my bag," said Zhang Xinya. "Hong Kong has the reputation of being the capital of gourmet food. I'll take you to taste the local delicacies here." Tang Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Zhang Xinya's back. Although Li Jiren was old, his body was still strong. He didn't need anyone's help and his steps were still steady. Beside him, in addition to 2 middle-aged bodyguards, there was also a woman accompanying him. "Little brother, may I know your surname?" "Tang." "Tan Xiu." Li Jiren nodded slowly. He stood in front of Tan Xiu and asked with a smile, "If my guess is correct, you should know the woman who snatched the wild ginseng from me, right? In other words, she should have a deep relationship with you, right?" Tan Xiu said indifferently, "You guessed correctly. She's my subordinate. Li Jiren stared blankly for a moment. He didn't expect that the old lady turned out to be the subordinate of the young man before him. He immediately said with a smile, "Little brother Tang, it's really rare to see such an interesting young man like you. If what you're saying is true, then you're abusing her. She's already so old. Isn't it time for her to retire and enjoy life?" Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "Isn't Li Jiren also unable to enjoy his retirement?" Li Jiren stared blankly for a moment before bursting into laughter. He said, "Little brother Tang is really interesting. Do you have time? Shall we have supper together?" Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I've already invited her." Li Jiren was stunned once again. He did not expect that Tan Xiao would actually refuse him. It had been so many years, and no one had ever refused his invitation except for that little girl surnamed Kong. Zhang Xinya was shocked at this time. She didn't expect that Li Jiren would come here personally, and his purpose was to invite Tan Xiao to have supper together. What was most inconceivable to her was that Tan Xiao actually refused. Recalling Li Jiren's power, she quickly said, "I'm fine with it, Mr. Tang." Tan Xiao was silent for a moment and then lightly said, "Since you don't mind, then let's go together. You're the local tyrants of Hong Kong, so you can arrange it yourself." Zhang Xinya looked at Li Jiren and fell into silence. Li Jiren said with a smile, "It turns out that little brother Tang is not from Hong Kong. In that case, why don't you come to my place? I went to the imperial capital a few days ago, and an old friend of mine gave me some good tea leaves. Shall we go and have a taste?" "Lead the way," Tan Xiao calmly said. At this time, a voice came. With a smile on his face, Ku Jintao came in front of them and smilingly said, "Uncle Li and this little brother, can you take me with you?" "Jintao, is it because you didn't buy that wild ginseng and want to know the identity of the buyer?" Li Jiren said with a smile. A trace of embarrassment appeared on Ku Jintao's face as his thoughts were exposed. But it was only for a moment before his expression returned to normal as he smilingly said, "Yeah, he's willing to spend 2 billion for a wild ginseng. It's definitely a big deal. Therefore, I'm also very curious about the owner of the wild ginseng who bought it. How should I address you, little brother?" "Tan Xiao." Tan Xiao didn't have any ill will toward Ku Jintao, although he and Li Jiren made him spend more than 1 billion yuan. But in this kind of auction, the highest bidder wins. Ku Jintao extended his hand to Tan Xiao and smilingly said, "I'm Ku Jintao." Tan Xiao shook hands with him and said, "Let's go." As they walked out of the auction house, many cars were already waiting outside. Many rich people hadn't left yet and gathered in 2s and 3s outside to chat. Seeing Li Jiren and Ku Jintao coming out, they came forward to greet them. Li Jiren was very amiable and responded to everyone with a smile. Until they got on the car and left, those rich people who greeted Li Jiren and Ku Jintao before began to talk. "Who's that young man beside Li Jiren and Ku Jintao? I think he was sitting together with the old lady who bought the wild ginseng at the auction, right? What's the identity of that young man? How could he leave with Li Jiren?" The famous singer Zhang Xinya seems to have an unusual relationship with that young man. They just got on the same car. I've never seen that young man before. Whose kid is he? Deepwater Bay number 79, Li Jiren's mansion. When the 5 cars slowly entered the mansion's gate and parked in the parking area inside, Tan Xiao and Zhang Xinya got off the Hummer. Tan Xiao was somewhat curious about Li Jiren's mansion. After all, Li Jiren's mansion had been very mysterious for so many years. Even the paparazzi in Hong Kong couldn't capture the interior of the mansion. "Little brother Tang, how's my place?" Li Jiren greeted them to enter the main building of the mansion. After taking a seat in the living room on the first floor, he asked with a smile. He could feel an extraordinary bearing from Tan Xiao. Such a bearing could only be possessed by those who had been in a high position for a long time. Therefore, he was very curious about Tan Xiao. "It's all right," said Tan Xiao calmly. The construction of the house, the interior decoration style, and the arrangement of the furniture are all very meticulous. The most important thing is that the feng shui here is good. You should have found someone to check it for you, right? Little brother Tang actually knows about feng shui? Li Jiren was surprised. "A little bit," said Tan Xiao with a smile. Li Jiren was immediately in awe. He was a firm believer in the study of feng shui. Those masters who knew about feng shui had a very high status not only in Hong Kong, but even in the world. Little brother Tang, who is your master? I'm sorry, it's not convenient for me to tell you. Tan Xiu shook his head. A bit of regret was revealed on Li Jiren's face. He then put away the thought of continuing to inquire. The reason why he invited Tan Xiu this time was to know why Tan Xiu bought the wild ginseng. Moreover, he didn't even hesitate to spend a lot of money to buy it. Where are you from, little brother Tang? Judging from your voice, you shouldn't be a local from Hong Kong, right? Shuangqing province, answered Tan Xiu. The mainland is developing very fast nowadays, said Kujintao with a smile. I've been to Shuangqing province. There are a lot of rich and powerful families there. But the Tang family? I've never heard of it. Little brother Tang must have a deep background since he can afford to buy ores and wild ginseng, right? Ring ring ring. The cell phone in Tan Xiu's pocket suddenly rang. He took it out and slightly furrowed his brows when he saw the caller ID. He then picked up the call and said, Tan Xiu speaking. Boss, it's Tianli. A lot of people have appeared near our restaurant in Hong Kong. If my guess is correct, it should be related to the Jiang Group, Wanyuan Real Estate, and Dukong Winery. Hao Lei has already brought the security personnel from the Grand Fortune Jewelry. Do you have any instructions? Tan Xiu's face turned cold and killing intent flashed in his eyes. He then said in a deep voice, I'll go there now. If they dare to attack the restaurant before I arrive, counterattack. Understood, replied Tianli respectfully. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiu looked at the surprised Li Jiren and Kujintao and said, Gentlemen, I have something to deal with. Let's meet again if there's an opportunity in the future. Also, regarding Mr. Ku's question, I can tell you that in this world, it's better to rely on yourself than the heaven and earth. If you have time in the future, please visit the Everlasting Feast Hall and take care of their business. That place is my business. After saying that, he then turned to look at Zhang Xinya and said, It seems that I can't let you be my tour guide tonight. I'll contact you again when I come to Hong Kong. I'll go with you, said Zhang Xinya quickly. Tan Xiu was silent for a moment, and then nodded. Li Jiren got up and looked at Tan Xiu with a bit of surprise. Little brother Tang, I know the Everlasting Feast Hall. Its headquarters is in Jingmen Island. I didn't expect you to be the owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall. I seem to have heard something from the phone call just now. Is there something wrong with the restaurant here? I have some connections in Hong Kong. Do you want me to help you solve it? No need. I'll handle it myself. Tan Xiu shook his head. Li Jiren and Kujintao watched as Tan Xiu and Zhang Xinya boarded the car, and quickly disappeared from their sight. Li Jiren then turned to the person at the side and said, Send someone to investigate Tan Xiu's identity, and find out what happened here. Understood. Uncle Li, you seem to value Tan Xiu a lot, no? Kujintao said with a smile. That's not your style. Li Jiren chuckled and said, I just feel that this young man is very mysterious. He had the aura of someone who had been in a high position for a long time. I found it hard to believe that a young man in his 20s could cultivate such an aura. Unless he's been living a superior life since childhood and has great power. That's why I'm a bit curious about him. Chapter 274. He spent a total of 2.5 billion in tonight's auction. Kujintao nodded. A young man in his 20s was able to make such extraordinary moves. Even though I'm experienced and knowledgeable, this is the first time I've seen something like this. Also, that Everlasting Feast Hall seems very mysterious, and seems to have a deep relationship with Grand Fortune Jewelry. As a matter of fact, Grand Fortune Jewelry is the Everlasting Feast Hall's property, said Li Jiren with a smile. What? Kujintao's expression changed, his face revealing a shocked expression. The smile on Li Jiren's face disappeared and was replaced with a bit of seriousness as he slowly said, Perhaps you don't know, but I've been to Jingmen Island more than 20 years ago. I was having some trouble with my business, and I needed a fleet of ships to help me with a cargo. At that time, the Everlasting Feast Hall had a sizable fleet. At that time, the owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall was surnamed Gu, a very mysterious woman. I sent people to investigate her, but they couldn't find anything. Many of the people I sent disappeared into thin air. Uncle Li, you mean, the people you sent were all killed by the Everlasting Feast Hall's people? Asked Ku Jintao in amazement. Li Jiren forced a smile and said, they weren't killed, but they were escorted to a mining area in Africa and became the coolies there. The owner of the mine was the former owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall. At that time, the Everlasting Feast Hall's boss promised to send someone to help me, but I needed to promise her two things. Ku Jintao listened to the secret of the past and asked, what promise? First, you are not allowed to send anyone to investigate the Everlasting Feast Hall, else my company and I will disappear from this earth, said Li Jiren with all seriousness. Second, help me find someone. Surname Tang, named Xiao. Ku Jintao suddenly understood and said, it turns out that you invited him here because he's the person the Everlasting Feast Hall's boss was looking for, Uncle Li. No, I didn't think about it at first. Li Jiren shook his head. I invited him over because I thought he was special. Just now when he said that he's the current owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall, I recalled what happened in the past. Ku Jintao said with a smile. Uncle Li, you have a discerning eye for talent. However, the Everlasting Feast Hall seemed to be very arrogant back then. They even dared to threaten you, Uncle Li. Jintao, remember my words, said Li Jiren solemnly. Don't make the Everlasting Feast Hall your enemy in this life. You mean this Everlasting Feast Hall is very powerful? Ku Jintao was surprised. Is it comparable to the current you? Li Jiren was silent for a moment and slowly said, perhaps the Everlasting Feast Hall can't compare with me in terms of wealth, but the terrifying energy it contains is something I can't compare to. More than 20 years ago, when the Everlasting Feast Hall helped me transport the goods, they were ambushed by pirates. I'm afraid I'll never forget those scenes for the rest of my life. Ku Jintao quickly asked, what scene? Li Jiren looked in the direction of the Eastern Sand Archipelago and enunciated each word clearly. The Black Shark pirate crew has roamed the Eastern Sand Archipelago for decades. They are made up of ruthless pirates and their numbers are more than 200. As a result, more than 200 powerful pirates carrying heavy firepower were completely annihilated by the 20 guards of the Everlasting Feast Hall. What? Ku Jintao exclaimed. Li Jiren retracted his gaze and deeply stared at him, saying, you didn't hear it wrong. Not a single bullet was used. Not even a firearm was used. They only used the daggers they carried with them to appear and disappear mysteriously near those pirates. In just half an hour, more than 200 pirates were all killed, while only 6 of the 20 guards were lightly injured, 1 was seriously injured, and none of them died. Hiss! Ku Jintao's body shivered and he couldn't help but gasp. Li Jiren gently patted Ku Jintao's shoulder and earnestly said, so, remember my words. You must never become enemies with the Everlasting Feast Hall because they are too terrifying. Even if I have strict security here and have trained a lot of powerful people, I still can't compare with them. I'll keep it in mind, Uncle Li. Ku Jintao nodded repeatedly with a strange glint flashing in his eyes. Hong Kong Nine Dragons Bay. The Everlasting Feast Hall occupied a very wide area with 4 antique tower-shaped restaurants, each of which had 5 floors. Between the 4 restaurants was a 7-story pagoda-shaped pavilion. Usually, the Everlasting Feast Hall's central restaurant was not open to the public. It would only be officially opened when VIPs came. Each of the 4 surrounding restaurants had a manager in charge, while Tian Li was the general manager. Chief Tian, what should we do now? At the window on the 3rd floor of the northern restaurant, a refined middle-aged man stood beside Tian Li and asked in a soft voice. His name was Deng Zhen, the manager of the northern restaurant. Boss will come back later. If those people dare to attack the restaurant, immediately fight back, said Tian Li indifferently. Don't kill them. It doesn't matter if they are disabled or disabled. Understood. Although Deng Zhen was very curious about the legendary big boss, he didn't dare to show his thoughts. He was already a high-ranking member of the Everlasting Feast Hall, since he could become the manager of the northern restaurant in Hong Kong. Yet, he had only seen the little boss. He had never seen the previous big boss or the current big boss. Behind the two of them, Hao Lei, whose every movement exuded a myriad of amorous feelings, held a cigarette between her fingers and lazily nestled on the sofa. she then said with a faint smile. It seems that our new boss is also a ruthless character. Is it because Elder Ji followed him? Tianli turned her head and calmly said, Elder Ji left Hong Kong half an hour ago and returned to Jingmen Island. A trace of surprise was revealed on Hao Lei's face. She puffed out a smoke ring and said, Tianli, how much do you know about our new boss? Tianli glanced at her and shook her head. I'm afraid I don't know as much as you do. Hao Lei rolled her eyes at Tianli and snorted. Humph, you're just being modest. In the past, apart from Feng and Shui, you were the best when it came to intelligence. Hurry up and tell me what you know. Boss is very easygoing and very young, said Tianli. Before Elder Ji left, he told me that Moan and Moa's opportunity has arrived. It was an order from boss. Opportunity. Hao Lei stared blankly and suddenly jumped up from the sofa. Her eyes flickered as she said in a deep voice, You mean they have learned? With a bit of envy in her eyes, Tianli said, That's right. Hence, this is also our opportunity. If we can grasp it, we'll soar to the sky. But if we can't, I'm afraid we'll have to wait for a long time. Hao Lei took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, In order to grasp this opportunity, I'll throw caution to the wind even if boss asks me to sacrifice myself. Puffed. Tianli couldn't help laughing and snappily glared at Hao Lei. Then she said with a straight face, We only need to do one thing in front of boss. What is it? Asked Hao Lei. Obey. Absolutely obey. Tianli said with a solemn expression. Even if boss asks us to die, we mustn't even frown. Hao Lei rolled her eyes and sat back on the sofa. She then crossed her legs and said, Do I need you to tell me that? In the past, big boss. In any case, our lives belong to Big Boss and the new boss. Deng Zhen stood beside Tianli, listening to the conversation between the two. A strong sense of curiosity rose in his heart. He couldn't understand what they were talking about, but he could guess that the opportunity they were talking about should be the core secret of the everlasting feast hall. Others might not be aware of Tianli and Hao Lei's strength, but he was very clear about it. When he was saved by Tianli in the past, the power she showed was absolutely terrifying. When can I get the opportunity they're talking about? Deng Zhen secretly sighed inwardly, but he was also full of expectations. Just as he turned his head to look out the window, his body suddenly trembled and he said in a deep voice, Chief Tian, the main character is here. Tianli turned her head and looked down. Suddenly, she saw more than a dozen black cars coming quickly. After they stopped at the entrance of the northern building, more than 20 strong men got off. 3 people then came down from 3 of the cars. She had seen them before. They were the Jiang Group's big boss, Jiang Tianba, Wanyuan Real Estate's big boss, Chen Jianye, and Dukong Winery's big boss, Du Changza. Beside Du Changza was Du Yang, who had been beaten before. Deng Zhen, take them to the second floor. Affirmative. Deng Zhen nodded, but he was somewhat worried inside. Although he knew that the Everlasting Feast Hall had a lot of powerful martial artists, they had provoked a total of 3 major forces this time. He was worried that the Everlasting Feast Hall wouldn't be their match if they really fell out with them. Tianli turned her head to look at Hao Lei and said, Let's not stay idle and wait for them on the second floor. If they don't give us an explanation today, I won't hesitate to slaughter them. Hao Lei giggled and said, We have the best relationship. If boss really orders us to slaughter them, don't fight with me. All these years, I can only move my hands and feet when I go to the mines in Africa to extract gold and diamonds every year. It's really annoying. You can still move your hands and feet every year, but I haven't seen blood for several years. Tianli snorted coldly. Only when I return to Jingmen Island can I spar with others. Since boss is coming this time, do you want me to propose to him that we swap our jobs? No. Hao Lei's complexion changed and quickly cried out. Puffed. Tianli couldn't help but burst into laughter. She gave her a pondering smile and turned to walk outside. The second floor of the northern building was large enough to accommodate hundreds of people. However, the tables and chairs here had been moved away by the Everlasting Feast Hall's staff. Only a chair was placed on the innermost side of the bright red carpet. Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, who were brought back by Tianli, were kneeling in front of the chair and guarded by 4 big men. Humiliation. Anger. The two of them grew up with a golden spoon in their mouths, and were accustomed to a life of luxury and extravagance. Usually, when others were in front of them, they would always put on a smiling face and fawn over them. When had they ever encountered such an incident today? When had they ever been beaten and forced to kneel here to wait for their parents? Yesterday's data didn't meet the requirement to be updated. Brothers and sisters, can you give a little more recommendation votes today? Chapter 275. When Tianli and Hao Lei came to the hall on the second floor, disdain flashed in their eyes when they saw Jiang Yu and Chen Fei kneeling on the ground. If these two guys didn't have some background and dared to provoke their boss, they would have already killed them. Tianli, tell them to let me go. When Jiang Yu saw Tianli, he immediately wanted to jump up from the ground, but he was held down by two burly men. One of them even gave him 2 hard punches. If you don't want to continue suffering, I advise you not to struggle. Tianli sneered. Your parents will be here soon. They don't want to discipline you, but I can discipline you for them. Remember, don't force me to kill you. Jiang Yu was dizzy from the beating, but he didn't dare to act rashly again. Chen Fei, who was kneeling there, seemed to be fire in his eyes. If he hadn't seen Jiang Yu being beaten, he would have already crawled up from the ground. After gasping for a few breaths, he stared at Chen Li and said, Tianli, the Everlasting Feast Hall may be famous in Hong Kong, but you dare to treat me like this? Just you wait. You'll have a miserable end. I'll make you kneel in front of me, crying and wailing. Idiot. Tianli was too lazy to pay attention to Chen Fei. She crossed her arms and waited for the arrival of those people. At the entrance of the Everlasting Feast Hall's north building, 10 big men in black suits with grim expressions were confronting Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianye, Du Changze, and more than 20 strong men they brought. Those men who had been lingering nearby also approached them, intentionally or unintentionally. Their number was nearly 100. Get out of the way. Deng Zhen, along with 2 big men, appeared behind the 10 guards and spoke in a deep voice. Immediately, the 10 big men stepped aside to make a path. Jiang Tianba's face was grim with a looming killing intent in his eyes. He coldly looked at Deng Zhen and said, I never thought that the Everlasting Feast Hall would be so arrogant. This is Hong Kong, not Jingmen Island. You dare to provoke us here? Are you tired of living? Deng Zhen sneered. If you think we're tired of living, then go ahead and do it. Judging from your big lineup, you must be here to make trouble, right? Jiang Tianba looked angry as he gritted his teeth and said, Cut the crap. Where's my son? Deng Zhen said, Inside. Jiang Tianba said coldly, Bring us to see Tianli. Deng Zhen lightly said, If you want to enter the gate you can, but tell your people to scram far away. Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianye, Du Changze, each of you can only bring 2 people with you. Otherwise, I'll regard it as you've already made your move. Chen Jianye took a step forward and coldly said, You know our identity, yet you still dare to be so arrogant. It seems that the Everlasting Feast Hall is very confident. I'd like to see what you're capable of. Finished. He nodded to the 2 men behind him and took the lead to walk inside. At this moment, Jiang Tianba didn't want to have a conflict with the Everlasting Feast Hall's people. After all, his son was still in their hands. After walking in with the 2 burly men, the anger in his heart became even stronger. Du Changze, along with Du Yang and a big man, lightly said, My son may not be in the hands of your Everlasting Feast Hall, but I also want to see whether this place is a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. Deng Zhen didn't utter a word. He turned around and led them to the hall on the second floor. After pushing the door open, he went straight to Tianli's side without uttering a word. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye were infuriated upon seeing their son being forced to kneel on the ground with his face obviously slapped. Good job, really good job. You're Tianli, right? I really didn't expect you to have such big guts. It seems that we can't settle this matter peacefully, said Jiang Tianba with a heavy tone. It's not up to you to decide whether we can settle this peacefully or not, said Tianli indifferently. If I had the final say, your son wouldn't be kneeling here now, but a cold corpse instead. How dare you? Jiang Tianba angrily shouted. Chen Jianye's expression was full of coldness. He shot a deep look at Tianli and then shifted his eyes to Hao Lei, who had a faint smile on her face and coldly said, "Chief Hao, do you also want to get involved?" "My boss will beat me if I don't get involved," Hao Lei said with a smile. "I had no choice. In order to please our boss, I could only run over here." Chen Jianya frowned and said, "Your boss? You mean, your Grand Fortune Jewelry and the Everlasting Feast Hall have the same boss?" Hao Lei said with a smile. "You're pretty smart. How did he give birth to such a stupid son? TSK. Could it be that the child's mother made you a cuckold? And this child isn't even your child? Bastard." Although Chen Jianya was secretly shocked, he still shouted angrily. Hao Lei acted as if she didn't hear Chen Jianya's shout. She smiled and said, "I was wrong. If he wasn't your biological son, you wouldn't be running over to save him now. I believe that you and your father must have done a DNA test." Chen Jianya angrily glared at Hao Lei before he shifted his gaze to Tianli and asked in a deep voice, "State your conditions. How can you let my son go?" "We can't make the decision." Tianli shook her head. "Our boss is on his way. Let's wait for him to arrive." "Who is your boss?" Chen Jianya asked coldly. Tianli sneered. "You want to know? Then let's wait." At this time, Du Yang, who was following behind Du Changze, secretly rejoiced when he saw Jiang Yu and Chen Fei's miserable appearance. He was glad that he didn't offend Tianli again, else the ones kneeling here wouldn't be just the two of them. His father, Du Changze, frowned deeply upon seeing Hao Lei after he came in. He didn't expect that the Everlasting Feast Hall and the Grand Fortune Jewelry had the same boss. He knew about the Grand Fortune Jewelry and heard that this jewelry company was very powerful in Africa, and even monopolized some gold and diamond mines. On the surface, the Grand Fortune Jewelry seemed to have billions of assets, but no one knew how much wealth it actually had. Du Changze was very astute. Looking at the fearless faces of Tianli and Hao Lei, as well as the angry and helpless faces of Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya, he wisely chose to stay silent. He knew what happened today and knew that he could advance or retreat now. If he chose to advance, he would follow Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya to launch an attack on the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelry. If he chose to retreat, he would directly apologize and bury the hatchet. He could only suffer in silence since his son was beaten. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiao took Mo An, and Zhang Xinya to the Everlasting Feast Hall in Hong Kong. The 10 guards didn't know Tan Xiao, but they knew Mo An and Mo An. They saluted them and directly let them pass. "Where's Tianli?" Tan Xiao looked at one of the guards and asked in a deep voice. The guard glanced at Mo An and Mo An. He knew that the one in front of him should be their new boss, so he quickly answered, "She's in the hall on the second floor." Tan Xiao nodded and went upstairs. Under the guidance of several big men inside, he came to the side hall. He glanced at the situation inside, and then brushed past Jiang Tianba and the others. He then walked to the chair between Tianli and Hao Lei and took a seat. "You're the boss of the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelry?" Chen Jianya coldly looked at Tan Xiao and asked in a deep voice. He had never seen Tan Xiao before, which made him secretly feel relieved inwardly. He thought that Tan Xiao was not a member of the big forces in Hong Kong that he couldn't afford to provoke. Tan Xiao took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it up and took a puff. He ignored him and turned to look at Zhang Xinya, who followed him and asked, "Do you want to wait in the other room? I'm afraid the scene will not be suitable for you." "Don't worry. The Everlasting Feast Hall has good food and drinks, so it should be to your taste." Zhang Xinya didn't expect that she would see such a scene when she came here with Tan Xiao. She could recognize many people inside, such as Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya, Du Changze, and even Tianli and Hao Lei. She knew that Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, who were kneeling there, were hedonistic playboys. "I'll wait for you." Recalling that Tan Xiao had helped her before, Zhang Xinya said directly. Tan Xiao nodded. He didn't mind if Zhang Xinya stayed here or not. At this time he turned to look at Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianya and Du Changze. He pointed to Jiang Yu and Chen Fei, who were kneeling at the side, and asked, "Who are their parents? Step forward." Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya took 2 steps forward at the same time, and glared at Tan Xiao. "I believe you already know the cause and effect of this matter." Tan Xiao nodded. I don't want to repeat it, so give me a solution. Jiang Tianba sneered. We naturally know the cause and effect of this matter. My son may have accidentally hit you with his car, but you've gone too far. Release my son, and give us an explanation for this matter. Otherwise, we won't let this matter rest. Chen Jianya also nodded and coldly said, I'm the only one qualified to teach my son a lesson. Whoever hit my son must have his hands broken and apologize to my son. Tan Xiu turned his head and lightly said, break his son's hands. Crack, crack. The two burly men standing beside Chen Fei were extremely agile. The moment they pressed down on Chen Fei's shoulders, their other fists smashed into Chen Fei's wrist. That explosive force directly broke both of Chen Fei's wrists. Bastard! Chen Jianya was furious and lifted his leg to rush toward Chen Fei. Back off. The big man standing next to Chen Fei instantly took out a sharp dagger and placed it on Chen Fei's neck. His eyes were full of coldness. If Chen Jianya dared to rush over again, he wouldn't hesitate to cut Chen Fei's throat. Chen Jianya's breathing stagnated and his footsteps instantly halted. Behind him, Jiang Tianba's eyes were filled with horror. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu would be so arrogant and ruthless at such a young age. Chen Jianya's words had caused Chen Fei's wrists to be broken. All of a sudden, he secretly rejoiced that he didn't say those words just now. Otherwise, the one who would have his hands broken would have been his son as well, right? You've successfully met the requirement to add more chapters today. Brothers and sisters, keep working hard. Strive to make Silent Night add a few more chapters every day. _. Chapter 276. Chen Jianya was so angry that he burst into laughter. His eyes were enough to kill as he stared fixedly at Tan Xiu. He gave a thumbs up and shouted, Well done! Well done! No one has dared to humiliate me like this for many years. If you have the ability, don't threaten me with my son. With an indifferent expression, Tan Xiu lightly said, Let them go. Affirmative. 4 big men picked up Chen Fei and Jiang Yu and threw them towards Chen Jianya. Ouch! Ah! Along with 2 screams, Chen Fei and Jiang Yu scrambled to hide behind their men. Their eyes were full of resentment as they looked at Tan Xiu. Let's go! Shouted Chen Jianya in a deep voice. Wait! Do you think the Everlasting Feast Hall is a place where you can come and go as you please? Tan Xiu sneered. If you don't give me an explanation today, none of you will be able to leave. Jiang Tianba paced 2 steps forward and sneered. What? Relying on this place to be your turf? Just like making things difficult for us? Believe it or not, your Everlasting Feast Hall will be demolished within half a day if I make a call. Tan Xiu made an inviting gesture and lightly said, Go ahead and try if you have the ability. When I came in just now, I saw a lot of your men outside, right? Call all of them in. I want to see how much power you have. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya exchanged glances and nodded to each other. Then, they immediately ordered the big men around them. In just a few minutes, 200 big men rushed into the Everlasting Feast Hall's entrance. At this moment, only then did Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya breathe a sigh of relief. Their son had been protected, and their men had also arrived. They believed that as long as they issued the order, these dozens of people from the Everlasting Feast Hall would definitely be beaten miserably. Moreover, their men were armed with a lot of firearms. Once they started fighting, the Everlasting Feast Hall's people wouldn't have enough bullets to kill them. At this time, dozens of Du Chang's men had also arrived at the Everlasting Feast Hall. However, he had discreetly distanced himself from Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya. His dozens of subordinates had also gathered together. Something's wrong. Du Changza had always been cautious and cautious. He sharply observed that no matter if it was Tan Xiu, Tian Li, or Hao Lei, none of them had the slightest trace of fear on their faces. In fact, their disdainful expressions caused him to secretly raise his guard. Moreover, when he looked at the dozens of strong men in the hall, he secretly felt that it was inconceivable that not only did those men not reveal a trace of fear, but they even faintly had the intention to fight. That's right. This was the will to fight. 34 people against 1 or 200. Du Changza instantly judged that the Everlasting Feast Hall definitely had a contingency plan. As for what that contingency plan was, it was likely not something simple. I can't act rashly. He made up his mind and took 2 steps back. Tanxiu. Standing next to Tanxiu, Zhang Xinya, who had never seen such a scene, looked frightened. She took half a step back and grabbed Tanxiu's shoulder. Tanxiu patted the back of her hand and looked at Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye, calmly saying, I'll give you one last chance. If you don't grasp it, I'm afraid this will be the most regretful decision you'll ever make in your life. Ha ha ha. Jiang Tianba burst into laughter and said, I've seen a lot of fools in my life, but I've never seen one as stupid as you. Can't you see the current situation? It's very easy to kill you if we want to. That's right. Chen Jianye sneered. You used the 2 kids as a threat before, so we had no choice but to take the risk and come here. But now, what else do you have to rely on? As the 2 men spoke, their men pulled out their pistols and knives, glaring at Tanxiu and the others like tigers watching their prey. They would immediately act as soon as their boss gave the order. Clap, clap, clap. Tanxiu applauded and smilingly said, Not bad. Your courage is commendable. There's another one here, right? It seems to be Du Changza, the owner of the Dukong winery. What about you? What's your decision? Du Changza was silent for a moment. Then he suddenly grinned and said, My son was beaten, so I naturally can't be indifferent. However, you can solve the issue between you first. I'll talk to you after you're done. After saying that, he gathered his arms together and retreated more than 10 meters with his subordinates, acting as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Du Changza, surnamed Du, Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye were furious. They didn't expect that Du Changza would run away and push them out to test Tanxiu. Tanxiu smilingly said, You're smart compared to these 2 idiots. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye, right? Since you want to play, then I'll accompany you. Except for the 4 of you, kill the rest. As his voice faded away, 4 figures instantly pounced toward Chen Jianye and Jiang Tianba. The first 4 to act were Tianli, Haolei, Mo On, and Mo On. Their speed was extremely fast, covering a distance of more than 10 meters in the blink of an eye. Puff, 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 puff. Sharp daggers pierced Chen Jianye and Jiang Tianba's shoulders as they dashed toward them. Nearly in the blink of an eye, Tianli and Haolei caught the 2 men and flashed backward. Mo On and Mo On's movements were as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water. Their sharp daggers drew a cold glint as they accurately cut off the wrists of several big men armed with guns in the front, causing their guns to fall down. Kill. Tens of big men from the Everlasting Feast Hall instantly pounced from the surroundings. All of them were armed with sharp daggers as they rushed into the hundreds of enemies like tigers rushing into a flock of sheep. Their eyes were sinister as they immediately locked on those big men armed with guns and attacked them. Some of the enemies armed with guns stood at the back, so they grabbed their companions and used their bodies to block the bullets. Bang, bang, gunshots rang out, followed by screams one after another. Tanxiu was sitting steadily while Zhang Xinya, who was beside him, looked pale with fear in her eyes. Her hands were tightly grabbing Tanxiu's shoulders. Tianli and Haolei, on both sides of the 2 men, grabbed the back of Jiang Tianba's and Chen Jianye's necks with sharp daggers at their throats. The one-sided slaughter was carried out amidst screams and screams. Blood splashed and bullets flew everywhere. Hundreds of Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye's men were like wheat stalks being cut by a harvester. In just half a minute, more than 20 big men armed with guns were killed, while the rest suffered heavy casualties. Puff puff. The ruthless slaughter stimulated Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye's hearts. The 2 men were aghast as they watched the slaughter scene. Their hearts were beating rapidly. How is this possible? Enduring the pain from the bloody holes in his shoulders, Jiang Tianba muttered to himself with a cold shiver all over his body. At this moment he was terrified. Never in his dreams had he ever thought that the dozens of security guards of the Everlasting Feast Hall would be so powerful. The men they brought were not good people either. Fighting and brawling were common occurrences, and any one of them could fight 2 or 3 people at once. Yet they couldn't even defend against the Everlasting Feast Hall's security guards. Who were these people? How could they have such powerful martial strength? How could they be so ruthless and merciless? In the distance, Dukong Winery's owner, Du Changza, was also frightened by the scene in front of him. His eyes were wide open, and as he staggered backward, his face was filled with shock. He never thought that it would happen. Never did he expect that Tan Xiu would be so domineering and immediately order to kill. Yet his men were simply inhuman. Each and every one of them was extremely powerful, and even firearms didn't pose much threat to them. Things have gotten out of hand. Du Changzi gulped down his saliva and turned to look at his son, who was also dumbfounded and pale. He fiercely glared at him before shifting his gaze back to the fighting scene. 2 minutes later, Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya's men were only left with more than 30 men alive. Fear was written all over their faces as they rushed toward the hall's door, escaping from this hell on earth. As for Tan Xiu's men, only one died and more than a dozen were injured. However, at this time, Mo An and Mo Ao had blocked the hall's door with 4 big men. They gripped their daggers and coldly observed the more than 30 big men who rushed over. Kill. 6 figures fiercely confronted them. Stop. All stop. At this moment, Jiang Tianba was already terrified. With a fearful look on his face, he shouted loudly. A sneer appeared on Tan Xiu's face as he waved his hand at Tianli. Immediately, Tianli shouted in a deep voice, "Stop!" While speaking, nearly 10 of the more than 30 big men were killed. As the fight came to a pause, Tang Xiu flicked the cigarette butt and accurately shot it into the flower pot at the corner of the outer wall more than 10 meters away. He then gently removed Zhang Xinya's hands from his shoulders and slowly got up. "Are you afraid?" Standing in front of Jiang Tianba, Tan Xiu asked with a faint smile. Jiang Tianba's body trembled as he angrily shouted, "You're dead. You're really dead. You've killed so many people. Aren't you afraid of being punished by the law?" "The law?" Tan Xiu's mouth was outlined as he sneered. "Do you think I'll be afraid since I dared to give the order? What? Your men can't handle it anymore, so you want to scare me with the law? Ha ha ha." At the side, Chen Jianya took a deep breath as he looked at Tan Xiu and said, "You win. We admit defeat this time. What's your condition? How can we end today's matter?" Tan Xiu looked at Chen Jianya and sighed. He then turned to look at the more than 20 big men who were besieged. After walking toward them, he looked at them and said, "Your fate is not good. You followed that stupid boss. But I'm a very kind person, so I can give you a chance to live. I don't know if you want it?" "Yes." More than 20 strong men, at this moment, were trembling with fear, and hurriedly nodded. They were also afraid, and a strong fear was born in their hearts. They even wished that everything that happened at this time was just a nightmare. Chapter 277. Tan Xiu waved to the people around him, motioning them to retreat. Then he gently moved his hands and feet and smilingly said, "I haven't moved my hands and feet for a while, so I'll play with you today. I'll fight more than 20 of you alone. If you can knock me down, you win and can leave here alive. But if you can't knock me down, then you'll all die in my hands. So I hope you can show your true abilities." "What?" Everyone was dumbfounded and looked at Tang Xiu with eyes full of disbelief. Tan Xiu pointed to Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya, who had knives on their necks, and said again, "Kill me, and I promise my men won't make things difficult for you again. Even your boss will be safe and sound. They won't treat you badly in the future given their wealth. Come on. I'll give you a chance, but it's up to you to grasp it." Greed. It was human nature. The desire to live. It could stimulate people's potential. The 24 strong men quickly exchanged glances and nodded. They were really forced into a desperate situation at this moment. The following battle had become a situation where only one of them could survive. Go. The 24 men were like hungry wolves that aggressively pounced on Tan Xiu. Their fists, which were as big as casseroles, whistled and smashed over, wishing to directly smash Tan Xiu to death. Humph. Tan Xiu didn't retreat but moved forward instead. His right leg lashed out like a long whip, and the bones in the fist of a strong man were directly smashed. His kicked hand also smashed into the hand of another man next to him. His body staggered and fell to the side. Bam bam. Tan Xiu's attack speed was extremely fast, at least several times faster than those enemies. In the blink of an eye, he had already kicked 5 times and punched 7 or 8 times. Along with the sound of broken bones, 7 or 8 strong men screamed and flew upside down. At this time, Tan Xiu's figure suddenly rushed forward. His fists turned into fingers and accurately pinched the throats of two men, directly crushing them. Slaughter. A one-sided massacre. Tan Xiu was like a ferocious tiger pouncing into a flock of soft sheep. Every time he attacked, an enemy would either die or be crippled. In the entire hall, everyone, including Tianli and Hao Lei, was dumbfounded as they looked at Tan Xiu, who was on a killing spree. They were powerful because they had experienced countless battles and had been cruelly nurtured since they were young. But Tan Xiu was at most in his 20s, wasn't he? A young man in his 20s was actually so powerful. This was already far beyond their expectations. Amazing. Tianli sighed. At this moment, Hao Lei's face was also full of solemnity. She said in a deep voice, "Boss is very strong. If it was a one-on-one fight, he could kill me within 3 moves." Tianli turned her head and glanced at her. A faint smile appeared on the corner of her mouth as she said, "Don't forget the identity of the boss." I reckon that the boss didn't even use his full strength to kill these ants. Hao Lei felt relieved and said with a bitter smile, "That's true. How can ordinary people compare to boss? If the little boss were here, he could probably kill these 20 people with a snap of his fingers." At this moment, the two of them were even more eager to obtain that opportunity. Once they obtained that fortuitous encounter, and obtained the method to cultivate a supreme divine technique, they would be like fish leaping over the dragon's gate, and the day they transformed into dragons and phoenixes was just around the corner. Their thoughts were different from the everlasting feast hall's people. Jiang Tianba, Chen Jianye, Jiang Yu, and Chen Fei were deeply shrouded in fear. They knew that they were done for because Tan Xiu and the everlasting feast hall's security guards were simply inhuman. Not only were they extremely powerful, but they were also ruthless and merciless. Now that they were in a situation where they would not rest until they were dead, they clearly realized that their lives were about to come to an end. Regret. They regretted it. Had they known that Tan Xiu was so terrifying and that the everlasting feast hall's people were so powerful, they wouldn't have dared to provoke Tan Xiu and the everlasting feast hall's people even if they had 10,000 guts. The heavens above and the earth below. If I don't die today, I'll strangle that unfilial son with my own hands. Chen Jianye slowly closed his eyes and murmured, "Done." After killing the last stalwart man, Tan Xiu flicked the blood on his hand and turned to look at Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye. His eyes then moved away from them and landed on Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. "You two, are you still arrogant now?" asked Tan Xiu with a faint smile. At this time, Jiang Yu and Chen Fei were already paralyzed on the ground. They were the silk pants of Hong Kong's young masters, usually arrogant and unruly. But at this time, looking at the hundreds of people who died tragically on the ground, they were already scared out of their wits. How could they still dare to be arrogant? Plop! A surge of strength suddenly surged inside Chen Fei's body as he crawled up and knelt toward Tang Xiu. He heavily kowtowed and cried, "Brother, I was wrong. I beg you, have mercy and spare me. I promise I won't be arrogant and cause trouble again. I'll run away immediately when I see you again. Please don't kill me." Jiang Yu was stunned and also cried bitterly like Chen Fei, kneeling and begging for mercy. Tang Xiu shook his head. He knew very well what kind of character these good-for-nothing playboys had since they were young. These guys bullied the weak and feared the strong. They wouldn't know pain if he didn't teach them a lesson. The reason why Tan Xiu took action was because he didn't want to kill them. In fact, his main purpose was not to kill them, but to shock and awe the everlasting feast hall's subordinates. Looking at Tianli, Hao Lei, the Mo brothers, and the others' respectful and worshipping expressions, Tan Xiu knew that he had achieved his goal. Tan Xiu wouldn't kill Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye. After all, too many people had died today. He had almost no connections in Hong Kong, so he couldn't deal with the aftermath. He didn't even want to waste his time here. After coming back to the chair, Tan Xiu looked at the pale and fearful Zhang Xinya and smilingly said, "What's wrong? Are you scared?" Zhang Xinya stepped back half a step and lowered her head without saying anything. Tan Xiu shook his head and calmly said, "I told you to leave, but you're very loyal and don't want to go. I'm afraid you're not used to this situation. I'll send someone to send you back." Zhang Xinya slowly raised her head, and her eyes fell on Tan Xiu's face. After a moment of silence, she said, Tan Xiu, killing people is not good. Tan Xiu turned around and pointed to the corpses on the ground, saying, these people deserve to die. If I wasn't strong enough, the one who died now would be me instead of them. I'm afraid even you will be implicated. Don't tell me that this is an era of peace. The law of the jungle is the law of survival no matter when. The path I'm going to take in the future is different from ordinary people. Don't think of me as an ordinary person. Zhang Xinya opened her mouth, but she didn't know what to say. I'll send someone to send you back. Tan Xiu said. I don't think you have any appetite for supper tonight. Forget what happened tonight, and have a good sleep. Tomorrow is a new day. Zhang Xinya was silent for a moment, and nodded silently. Subsequently, Tan Xiu sat back on the chair, and took a clean towel handed by a big man. He wiped his face and hands clean, and then looked at the ashen-faced Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye, saying with a smile, what else do you two want to say? Chen Jianye didn't say anything. Jiang Tianba, on the other hand, sighed with a bit of bitterness. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. We've lost, and we're willing to accept our defeat. If you want to kill, then kill us all. Tan Xiu gave a thumbs up and praised. Not bad. You're very self-aware. It's good that you know you're going to die today, but you want to act tough before you die. But I won't let you get what you want. Sometimes, wanting to die is also a difficult thing. Jiang Tianba felt a chill in his heart and said in a deep voice, what else do you want? Nothing much, said Tan Xiu. I just want to let you go. Let them go? Jiang Tianba was dumbfounded. Disbelief burst out from his eyes. Even Chen Jianye looked at Tan Xiu incredulously, wondering if he had heard it wrong. Tan Xiu said, it's actually very simple to let you go. As long as you agree to some of my conditions, not only will you not suffer any physical pain, you won't be killed, and you can still live comfortably in the future. Jiang Tianba took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, what conditions? Tan Xiu lightly said, 49% of the Jiang Group shares and 49% of the Wanyuan real estate shares. This is the first condition. Agreed. No problem. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye agreed without hesitation. Compared to their lives, money was just a worldly possession. If they were to die now, not to mention the group shares, everything they owned would vanish into thin air. Tan Xiu was very satisfied with their answers and said, the second condition is that their deaths have nothing to do with us. You will deal with the aftermath and seal off the news. If any news is leaked, I'll send people to slaughter your whole family if you make a mistake in dealing with the aftermath. All right. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye exchanged glances and replied in unison. Tan Xiu continued. You must go all out to help the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelry if they need your help in the future. The time limit is 10 years. After 10 years, if you do a good job, I'll pay you back. 10 years later, not only will I let bygones be bygones, but I'll also give you a reward. Agreed. Agreed. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye replied again. The fourth and last condition, said Tan Xiu. You two good-for-nothing sons will only be a scourge if you stay in the country. Let them go abroad. They can do whatever they want as long as they don't implicate you. Tan Xiu waved his hand and looked at Tian Li saying, help them deal with these corpses. You will also assist them in dealing with the aftermath. As for their shares, you can deal with them as you wish. You can sell them for cash or take annual dividends from their company. It's up to you. Sell them. Tian Li replied without hesitation. I told you, it's up to you. Tan Xiu let out a faint smile. Understood. Chapter 278. The law of the jungle was the law of the jungle. The law of the jungle was the law of the jungle. Tan Xiu had been in the immortal world for tens of thousands of years, and had a deep understanding of its meaning. Although it was no longer the era of those who submit to me will prosper or those who oppose me will perish, the spirit of I won't offend others if they don't offend me, but if they offend me, I'll definitely offend them was still necessary. He was not a cold-blooded butcher, but he showed no mercy to those big men who were killed. Firstly, if he didn't kill them, he would be the one to die today. Secondly, they were not good people and had done many evil deeds. They had a powerful background to protect them, so the law couldn't punish them severely. Then he would use the means of the wicked will be tortured by the wicked to put an end to the sins they had committed. Someone once said that killing a bad person could save many good people. Tang Xiu had a clear conscience in killing them, and it was a matter of course. In his eyes, the lives of good people were valuable, while the lives of bad people were worthless. However, tonight he found something interesting. Tian Li and Hao Lei, these two seemingly delicate women, were unexpectedly experts trained by Gu Yan financial power. It was the foundation of every force. For Gu Yan to hand over the everlasting feast hall and grand fortune jewelry to the two of them, it showed that she had absolute trust in them. Tan Xiu had no reason to doubt the people Gu Yan trusted. The two of you performed well tonight. Contact Chen Xiaohua, who is in charge of the antique business, and Jin Cheng, who is in charge of the real estate business. The four of you go back to Jingmen Island and find Ji Qimei. Tell her that I told her to teach you what she taught An and Ao. Tan Xiu slowly got up from the chair and said with a faint smile, "What?" Tian Li and Hao Lei's bodies trembled as disbelief burst out from their eyes. This kind of light only lasted for a few seconds before it was replaced by intense ecstasy. Excitement. Ecstasy. Both of them had been dreaming of obtaining the immortal cultivation method, and their dreams were finally coming true. Tan Xiu didn't pay attention to their thoughts. He lit up another cigarette and came to the front of the Du father and son, whose faces were full of horror. Then he lightly said, "Since you want to wait for me to deal with the two of them, then come and talk to me. Can we do it now?" The corner of Du Chang's mouth twitched a few times. Turning around, he fiercely slapped Du Yang's face and shouted, "Kneel." Du Yang's heart was filled with fear. He immediately knelt in front of Tan Xiu. Du Changza wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and bitterly said, "Your surname is Tang, right? That superstar seemed to have addressed you before." "Boss Tang, my son has made a mistake, an outrageous mistake, but I beg you to spare his life. My business is very diverse, so it's hard for me to decide which company I'll give you. What do you think of that? I'll take out 2 billion as an apology. 3 billion, then you can scram." Du Changza secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Any problem that could be solved with money was not a big deal. His net worth was tens of billions. Although 3 billion was a huge number, he could still afford it. Calculating it, the 49% of the Jiang Group and Wanyuan Real Estate shares was the same as Jiang Tianba and Chenjianya's capital. "Boss Tang, can you give me some time? Although I can take out 3 billion, I can't do it if the time is too short." 3 days. "I'll give you 3 days," Tan Xiu lightly said. 3 days is enough, Du Changza quickly said. Tan Xiu waved his hand and said, "All right. You can go now. Remember, watch your son and don't let him commit any more mistakes in the future." Du Changza quickly promised, "I'll discipline him well after I go back. I guarantee that he won't commit any more crimes and provoke troubles again." Tan Xiu looked at Du Changza, who was about to leave with tens of his men. Then he suddenly said, "Leave all the guns here." "Understood." Without waiting for Du Changza's order, the 7 or 8 big men hurriedly threw their guns to the ground. In their eyes, Tan Xiu was a living fiend, a ruthless and merciless god of death. If they were to go against his will, they wouldn't be able to walk out of the everlasting feast hall alive. A few minutes later, Tan Xiu left the everlasting feast hall with the Mo brothers and boarded a Hummer to return to 13th Shallow Water Bay Road. He needed to take a good rest, since he still had to rush to 9 Dragons Island tomorrow. 79 Deepwater Bay Road. Li Jiren and Ku Jintao were drinking tea and chatting. "Boss." With a strange expression, Li Jiren came to Li Jiren. "What's the result of the investigation?" asked Li Jiren as he raised his brows. "We haven't found Tan Xiu's identity yet, but I've contacted my acquaintances in Shuangqing province in the mainland. They should be able to find out his true identity soon," said Li Jiren. "However, there's a situation in the everlasting feast hall. According to the results of the investigation, Tan Xiu and the Jiang Group's young master, Jiang Yu, the heir of Wanyuan Real Estate, Chen Fei, the young master of Dukong Winery, Du Yang, and Qi Changxing of Kongyong Electric Appliances had a conflict. While Tan Xiu was attending the auction, the Everlasting Feast Hall's general manager, Tian Li, brought some people to capture Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. After Tan Xiu arrived, the Jiang Group's boss, Jiang Tianba, Wanyuan Real Estate's boss, Chen Jianye, and Du Changza of Dukong Winery rushed into the Everlasting Feast Hall with a couple hundred people. Shortly after, Tan Xiu also rushed to the Everlasting Feast Hall. Li Jiren squinted his eyes and slowly said, "What's the result?" Jiang Tianba, Jiang Yu, Chen Jianye, and Chen Fei were the first to leave the Everlasting Feast Hall with injuries on their bodies. The people they brought into the Everlasting Feast Hall didn't come out. Du Changza and Du Yang, father and son, left the Everlasting Feast Hall with dozens of men. But just as they walked out of the Everlasting Feast Hall's front door, Du Changza beat Du Yang quite ruthlessly. Li Jiren deeply frowned and said in a deep voice, "You mean the Everlasting Feast Hall has detained Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye's men?" "They're all dead," said Li Jiren with a forced smile. "What?" Li Jiren and Ku Jintao abruptly got up with shock written all over their faces. "They're all dead?" A couple hundred people entered the Everlasting Feast Hall, but aside from Du Changza and his men, the rest of them died in the Everlasting Feast Hall? Knock, knock. The door was knocked as a panic-stricken middle-aged man strode into the room and quickly reported, "Boss, I've cut off contact with more than a dozen people we sent to monitor the Everlasting Feast Hall. However, one of them was talking to me on the phone before he cut off contact with me. He only left 2 words. "What 2 words?" asked Li Jiren in a deep voice. "Save me," said the middle-aged man in a deep voice. Taking a deep breath, Li Jiren shook his head with a forced smile and said, "It was the same situation in the past. I didn't expect that the same mistake would repeat itself. It seems I can only make another trip." Ku Jintao, who had just sobered up from the shock, quickly asked after hearing Li Jiren's words, "Uncle Li, you mean, you're going to see Tan Xiu and ask him to release those people? What else can I do besides asking for help?" Li Jiren forced a smile. "Boss Gu may be powerful in the past, but he rarely ordered a massacre. But Tan Xiu, alas, I'll do my best." "I'll go with you, Uncle Li," said Ku Jintao quickly. "I'll go by myself." Li Jiren shook his head. "It's not good for you to go with me. Send someone to help me check Tan Xiu's residence. I've already found his residence. It's at number 13, Shallow Water Bay Road," said Li Jiren. Li Jiren nodded and quickly left in a car with Li Jiren and 2 bodyguards. Near them, there were a few cars quietly following them. Number 13, Shallow Water Bay Road. After coming back, Tan Xiu took a bath and changed into clean clothes. Just as he was about to cultivate, someone knocked on the door. "Is there something?" Tan Xiu opened the door and asked. "Boss Li Jiren is here to visit," said Mo On respectfully. Tan Xiu squinted his eyes and instantly understood his purpose of coming. However, Li Jiren's identity was different. Although he didn't care about wealth, he still nodded and said, "Take him to the living room. I'll be there shortly." "Understood," Mo On replied and turned to leave. Tan Xiu pondered for a moment before he put on his shoes and walked out of the door. It was not easy to conceal what happened in the Everlasting Feast Hall today. After all, the series of gunshots would certainly attract the attention of others. It was very likely that it would alert the police. Li Jiren had been operating in Hong Kong for most of his life, and must have some connections in the political circle. He must do something if he wanted to save the lives of his subordinates. After ordering the servants in the villa to prepare tea, Tan Xiu came to the living room. "Little brother Tang, we meet again." Li Jiren, who had just sat on the sofa, stood up and greeted with a smile upon seeing Tan Xiu come in. "It seems that our fate is deep." Tan Xiu chuckled and said, "We can meet twice in just one night." "Our fate is indeed deep." Li Jiren forced a smile. "Not only with you, but also with your Everlasting Feast Hall. It's a fate that brings me together. In the past, I sent a group of people to Jingmen Island to inquire about the Everlasting Feast Hall. But after they were captured, they were thrown to the mines in Africa to work as coolies for several months. You know what happened tonight?" Tan Xiu asked lightly. "I heard about it." Li Jiren nodded. "That's why I came here to ask little brother Tang if you need me to help you. In Hong Kong, I have connections in both the business and political circles. The corner of Tan Xiu's mouth raised as he said with a smile, "It seems that Old Li is here to help me in my hour of need. Since that's the case, you can help me with the people in the government department. Come, let's have some tea." Li Jiren glanced at the servant who brought the tea. After hesitating for a moment, he asked in a low voice, "Little brother Tang, about my men. Old Li, I'm afraid the tea here is not as good as yours, so please don't mind it." Tan Xiu waved his hand. "Old Li, I'm afraid that the tea here is not as good as yours. Please don't mind it." Li Jiren was happy inwardly as he understood and said with a smile, "Little brother Tang, to tell you the truth, I still owe the Everlasting Feast Hall a favor. I haven't seen Boss Gu for more than 20 years. Is she doing well?" The third chapter is over. Give me a monthly ticket to refresh yourself. Chapter 279. Do you know Yen'er? Tan Xiu raised his brows and asked, "Yen'er? Little brother Tang, who is this Yen you're talking about?" asked Li Jiren with a confused expression. "Gu Yen'er," answered Tan Xiu calmly. A strange light flashed in Li Jiren's eyes. He didn't expect that Tan Xiu would address Gu Yen'er as such. It must be noted that Gu Yen'er looked like she was in her 20s more than 20 years ago. Shouldn't she be in her 50s now? That's right. It's Gu Yen'er, Boss Gu. Something happened to me more than 20 years ago. There was a batch of very important goods that needed to be shipped from abroad. At that time, the Everlasting Feast Hall had a fleet, so I shamelessly asked Boss Gu for help. She helped you? Tan Xiu was surprised. She helped me recover a huge loss. Li Jiren nodded and said, "But she didn't ask for money. She only gave me 2 requests." "What requests?" asked Tan Xiu curiously. "First, no more people can be sent to investigate the Everlasting Feast Hall. Second, help her find a man named Tan Xiu. I have a portrait there. Although you're also called Tan Xiu, your appearance is somewhat different." "Tan Xiu?" Tan Xiu secretly sighed inwardly. As for the portrait being somewhat different, that was for sure. How could his appearance in the immortal world be the same as now? "It seems that Yen'er has done a lot for me. Elderly, if possible, I hope you don't send people to investigate me. Even if you do, I'm afraid they won't find anything. Furthermore, Yen'er's health is not very good. She hasn't been involved in the Everlasting Feast Hall's affairs for more than 10 years. The one managing the Everlasting Feast Hall now is Yen'er's disciple, Gu Xiaoxue. I'll have to trouble you to take care of the Everlasting Feast Hall's business in the future." Tan Xiu sighed with emotion and said with a smile. Li Jiren's expression shifted and he quickly said, "It's my duty to take care of the Everlasting Feast Hall's business. However, what happened to Boss Gu? Do you want me to help you find a doctor? I heard that a divine doctor has appeared in Shuangqing Province's Star City. If you're willing, I'll personally go to Star City and invite that divine doctor to Jingmen Island." Tan Xiu looked at Li Jiren with a strange expression. He was at a loss whether he had to laugh or cry as he said, "The news about this divine doctor in Star City has spread so fast? How did it get to Hong Kong?" Li Jiren said with a smile, "I just heard about it recently. An old friend of mine in the imperial capital said that Tang." Suddenly, the smile on his face froze and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Tan Xiu was confused. "Tang what?" Li Jiren stared blankly at Tan Xiu and asked, "As far as I know, the divine doctor of Star City Chinese Medical Hospital is also called Tan Xiu? My old friend said that the Tang family in the imperial capital, not only was his asthma cured by Tan Xiu, but Tan Xiu is also his grandson." "You're from Shuangqing Province, could it be?" Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing and said, "There's nothing I can't ask. It's better to let you know now than to let you send people to investigate me." "That's right, I'm Tan Xiu of Star City Chinese Medical Hospital. But I'm just a temporary doctor there, not an official one. As for the Tang family, I didn't expect that my father is Tang Yunda and my grandfather is Tang Guosheng." Hiss, Li Jiren was frightened by Tan Xiu's identity. If Tan Xiu was only a descendant of the Tang family and Tang Guosheng's grandson, he might not be shocked. But Tan Xiu was still a divine doctor. Furthermore, the most important thing was that Tan Xiu was also the owner of the Everlasting Feast Hall. With so many identities added up together, even though he had an extraordinary status, he was still shocked by this scene. Don't be so surprised. Tan Xiao said lightly. If I could cure Yen'er, I would have done it long ago. After all, she's my favorite apprentice. Li Jiren nodded and recovered from his shock. Then he said, since you're a divine doctor, naturally. His words came to an abrupt halt again. Apprentice? What did Tan Xiao just say? Gu Yen'er was his favorite apprentice? What kind of joke was this? Tan Xiao didn't explain further. Looking at Li Jiren's shocked expression, he shook his head and said, all right, I hope you can keep my relationship with Yen'er a secret. Also, if there's nothing else, you can go back now. Li Jiren didn't move. His eyes stared at Tan Xiao as if he felt that this young man was really mysterious and unfathomable. Then I'll take my leave. Seeing Tan Xiao's order for him to leave, Li Jiren got up and said. Tan Xiao sent him to the courtyard and watched him get on the car and leave. Then he turned around and returned to his room upstairs. Today's killing didn't bring him any negative impact, so he directly sat cross-legged on the bed and began to cultivate. With perseverance in cultivation, he could break through to the flesh-strengthening stage at any time. As long as he reached the flesh-strengthening stage, his strength would skyrocket a lot. Although he didn't dare to say that he was invincible in the world, the number of people who could be his opponent would be very few. Simsha Sui, Hong Kong. In a luxurious European-style villa, Du Yang knelt in the hall in front of Du Changze. His face was full of regret and self-blame. His family had to compensate 3 billion yuan because of a small conflict. Even if he was usually arrogant and domineering, he also knew that he had done something wrong at the moment. In the past, he was very angry when he was punished to kneel, and he even admitted his mistake on the surface, but he was not convinced inside. But at this time, he didn't have any complaints. You know you're wrong? Du Changze didn't hit Du Yang again, but sat straight on the sofa with a cold light flashing in his eyes. Beside him, his wife, Bai Yueqin, looked at Du Yang's red and swollen face with a distressed expression. Du Yang raised his head and bitterly said, Dad, I know I'm wrong. Du Changze angrily said, if you know you're wrong, then correct it. Otherwise, you'll take over our family's business in the future, and sooner or later, you'll squander it all. Rather than that, I might as well donate my money to charity after I die. At least I can leave a good reputation. Du Yang took a deep breath and seriously said, Dad, if today's matter didn't happen, I might still be the same as before, ignorant and incompetent. But it's different now. Today's scene is the most terrifying and frightening thing I've ever seen in my life. I promise you that I won't contact those scoundrels anymore, and I won't idle around anymore. I'm willing to help the company. Even if you want me to start from the bottom, I'm willing. Looking at his son's serious expression, Du Changze finally felt somewhat gratified inside. But that was a compensation of 3 billion yuan. Once he collected it and gave it to the other party, it would definitely have a great impact on his business. Get up. Du Yang slowly got up. After being silent for a moment, he said, Dad, you don't know much about the Everlasting Feast Hall, do you? What's the origin of that surname Tang? How could he be so terrifying? Du Changze forced a smile and said, You ask me, but who should I ask? Had I known that they were so powerful, why would I bring you to visit them? Alas, our family can be considered to be in a good situation. At least, we managed to save most of our business and the lives of dozens of our men. Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye can be said to have kicked an iron plate this time. At least 2/3 of our family's property must be handed over to the other party. You guys really don't let me rest easy. Du Yang lowered his head. Suddenly, he looked dazed and said, Dad, there was another person involved in today's matter besides me, Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. I still remember that Tan Xiao personally said that his family's elders should apologize. Du Changze stared blankly and doubtfully asked, Who else? Qi Changxing, answered Du Yang. Du Changze blinked. Suddenly, a glint flashed in his eyes as he said in a deep voice, You didn't lie to me. Qi Changxing was really involved in this matter? Yes, Du Yang said seriously. But he wasn't beaten. Du Changze snorted coldly. He took out his mobile and dialed a number. Simsha Sui, Fukang Hotel. Qi Chengshan was holding a crystal cup as he entertained his friends in a luxurious and spacious hall. The gorgeous crystal chandelier exuded a soft light, reflecting dreamlike colorful lights from every angle. Gorgeous European-style tables and chairs, as well as a small and exquisite bar counter, were painted pure white, exuding an aristocratic atmosphere everywhere. Ring, ring, ring. His mobile phone's ringtone interrupted Qi Qingshan's cheerful and witty conversation. After giving an apologetic expression to the few of them, he grabbed his mobile and looked at the caller ID. He immediately left his seat and walked outside while saying with a smile, "Brother Du, why did you call me? I have a piece of news to sell to you." Du Chang's solemn voice came from the phone. Qi Qingshan stared blankly for a moment. His footsteps came to a halt as he asked doubtfully, "What news?" "Don't ask me what the news is," said Du Changza in a deep voice. "If you want to buy it, transfer 500 million to me now and 500 million after you're done with your business. 1 billion for this news won't be much." Qi Qingshan's face turned gloomy as he lightly said, "Brother Du, you won't even tell me what the news is. How do I know if spending 1 billion for the news is worth it? Brother Qi, we've known each other for decades. Do you really think I'm the kind of swindler who asks for sky-high prices? I can tell you something first. If you keep being kept in the dark and don't do anything tonight, I'm afraid you'll end up miserable, and so will your Qi family enterprise. The price you'll have to pay will probably be far more than 1 billion. What do you mean?" Qi Qingshan was shaken inwardly. He knew Du Chang's character and knew that the man would never speak without thinking. "Tell me, do you agree or not?" said Du Changza. Qi Qingshan was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "If the news you provided is really worth such a high price, then I agree. But if I don't think it's worth it, I hope you can return it to me. Brother Du, 500 million will be transferred to your account within half an hour." "All right." The call ended. Qi Qingshan's brows furrowed into the shape of a chuan. A deep worry rose inside his heart. Although he didn't know where the problem was, Du Changza obviously knew that there was some bad news for his Qi family enterprise. Furthermore, it was very likely that the problem was very serious. Please inform the brothers and sisters that Quiet Night will be attending a lecture event in Hengdian Film City today, so the second chapter may be updated a bit late. Please forgive me, brothers and sisters. But as long as the recommendation votes and monthly votes meet the requirements, Quiet Night will definitely not go back on her words. Chapter 280. Qi Qingshan knew Du Changza very well. They had been friends for decades and had many contacts. However, they were both businessmen, and business was business. He could understand why Du Changza wanted money from him. But what important news! It was worth 1 billion? After Qi Qingshan sent someone to transfer the money to Du Chang's private account, his phone rang again. Standing in the quiet corridor, Qi Qingshan pressed the answer button. "Brother Qi, you'd better come to my place if possible. Some words are not convenient to say on the phone. But you must be fast. It can be said that you're racing against time now." Du Chang's voice came out of the phone. "I'm coming now," said Qi Qingshan in a deep voice. "Don't hang up yet. You'd better bring your son when you come because this matter is related to him." "What do you mean?" "Don't ask first. I'll tell you when I come." The call ended. Qi Qingshan knitted his brows and pondered for a moment. Then, he dialed Qi Changxing's cell number and immediately asked him to come over after learning that he was nearby. At the entrance of Fukang Hotel, a Bentley was quietly parked outside. Qi Qingshan stood next to the Bentley, watching the Porsche moving fast in the distance with a cold glint flashing in his eyes. He could faintly guess that the bad news that Du Changza told him was probably the big trouble his son had caused. "Dad, why did you call me over so urgently? Is there something wrong?" Qi Changxing smelled a bit of alcohol. He was very worried after experiencing today's matter, so he looked for some friends to drink to calm down. However, receiving a call from his father made him a bit nervous. Qi Qingshan sat in the car and said in a deep voice, "Get in the car and follow me to a place." Qi Changxing threw the Porsche's key to the security guard at the entrance. After sitting in the car, he curiously asked, "Dad, where are you taking me?" Qi Qingshan coldly snorted and lightly said, "Du Changza just called me and said that he wants to sell me an important news. Do you know how much it is worth?" "Du Changza? Du Yang's father?" Qi Chongqing's worry deepened as he shook his head and said, I don't know. 1 billion, said Qi Chengshan. Qi Chongqing stared blankly. His eyes instantly turned round as he exclaimed, Dad, you agreed? I know Du Chong's character, said Qi Chengshan. If it wasn't for some really important news, he wouldn't have gone to the extent of teasing me for 1 billion yuan. However, before I see him, I want to ask you, did you cause some big trouble? Qi Chongqing's heart continued to sink, and his expression became somewhat ugly. After hesitating for a moment, he felt that he couldn't hide this matter anymore, so he bitterly said, Dad, I seem to have stirred up some trouble. Today, Qi Chongqing explained the cause and effect of the matter and finally said, although the other party told me to tell you to go and apologize, the other party told me to tell you. But I don't think it's necessary. I wasn't the one who caused that incident. I only said a few words in support. The coldness in Qi Chengshan's eyes turned thicker as he asked in a deep voice, did you really see Jiang Yu and Chen Fei being captured by the Everlasting Feast Hall's general manager, Tian Li? Qi Chongqing quickly nodded and said, it's absolutely true. However, Yang wasn't captured at that time. I'm very curious. Qi Chengshan slowly closed his eyes, his mind constantly thinking about this matter. He knew about the Everlasting Feast Hall, and he had visited the Everlasting Feast Hall many times to entertain his friends. He didn't have much contact with Tian Li, but he had met her a few times. She was a gentle, virtuous, modest, and cautious woman. He couldn't figure out why Tian Li changed her usual style and dared to capture Jiang Yu and Chen Fei. It must be noted that the identity and background of those two brats were not ordinary, and their strength was much stronger than the Everlasting Feast Hall. Could it be? Was Tian Li not afraid that the Everlasting Feast Hall would lose its foothold in Hong Kong? A few minutes later, Qi Chengshan decided to call Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye to ask them about the specific situation. After dialing Jiang Tianba's number, the other party took a long time to pick up. Brother Jiang, it's me, old Qi. Did I disturb your rest by calling you so late? Get to the point. Jiang Tianba's stiff voice came from the other side of the phone, and there was a hint of anger in his tone. Qi Chengshan stared blankly and asked with a confused expression, Brother Jiang, I heard from my kid that your son had a conflict with the Everlasting Feast Hall's people. What the hell is going on? Inquire about it yourself. Then the call was hung up. Qi Chengshan stared blankly at the end of the call coming from the phone. His mind seemed to be shrouded in a thick fog, and he was somewhat at a loss. He had a good relationship with Jiang Tianba, but what happened to Jiang Tianba today? It was as if he had eaten gunpowder. He himself. I don't seem to have offended him? After coming back to his senses, Qi Chengshan shook his head and dialed Chen Jianye's number. What is it? Chen Jianye's low voice came from the phone. Qi Chengshan said with a smile. Old Chen, listening to your tone, you seem to be in a bad mood? What happened? Chen Jianye angrily said. If it were you, would you be happy to lose more than half of the family business you've worked so hard for decades? Qi Chengshan was dumbfounded because after Chen Jianye said that, he also hung up the phone. What does that mean? The family business that he had painstakingly earned over the past few decades was lost in an instant? Suddenly, Qi Chengshan's heart turned cold. His eyes instantly focused as an absurd thought emerged in his mind. Could it be that Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye suffered a loss in the hands of the Everlasting Feast Hall's people? The thought only lingered in his mind for a few seconds before he directly dispelled it. It was because he felt that the idea was simply impossible. Even if the Everlasting Feast Hall had some ability, it would be very difficult for them to deal with Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianye at the same time. Sim Sha Sui. Qi Chengshan brought Qi Chongqing to the Du family's villa. When he saw Du Changze, he immediately asked, Brother Du, can you tell me now? What's the news? Du Changze shook hands with him and then looked at Qi Chongqing, who was behind him. He shook his head and said, Come with me inside. It's not the place to talk outside. Inside the study room. After Du Changze invited Qi Chengshan to take a seat, a bitter expression hung on his face as he sighed. Brother Qi, I would never have accepted your money if it were before. But now is different, and I hope you don't blame me. We raised a good son, but it's only inviting disaster for us. Say it, said Qi Chengshan with a frown. Since you brought your son here, you should know about the conflict between the four of them and the Everlasting Feast Hall's boss, right? Said Du Changza in a deep voice. I heard a bit about it. Qi Chengshan nodded. Tianli kidnapped Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya's son, and brought him to the Everlasting Feast Hall. Du Changza shook his head and said, the three of us brought nearly 200 people to teach the Everlasting Feast Hall's people a lesson. As a result, more than 100 people brought by Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya were all killed. 49% of the shares of their two companies were extorted. I, however, paid a price of 3 billion yuan to save our lives, as well as the lives of dozens of our men. What? Qi Chengshan suddenly got up with a horrified look on his face. Shocking. He was shocked by the news. He was well aware of the background of Du Changza, Jiang Tianba, and Chen Jianya. They had money and manpower. If they joined forces, they would only be a bit weaker than Li Jiren, the first prince of Hong Kong. What kind of existence was the Everlasting Feast Hall? How could the three of them not be their match even after joining forces? Brother Du, are you kidding me? Qi Chengshan's lips squirmed a few times as he asked with a trembling voice. With a solemn face, Du Changza shook his head and said, do I look like I'm joking? Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya have painstakingly trained a group of henchmen, yet more than half of them are dead. More than 2/3 of their wealth has been lost. If you don't believe me, you can call them now. Suddenly, Qi Chengshan finally understood why Jiang Tianba and Chen Jianya talked to him with that kind of attitude when he called them. They were doomed. Just as this thought flashed in Qi Chengshan's mind, his complexion turned as pale as a sheet of paper. He suddenly realized something as his pupils violently shrunk and hurriedly asked, you mean they will attack me? Brother Qi, you didn't see the scene at that time. Du Changza forced a smile. More than 100 corpses and blood all over the ground. The other party was too ruthless. Describing them as ruthless and merciless is not enough. Especially the Everlasting Feast Hall's boss, a young man in his 20s, yet he killed more than 20 people with his own hands. Do you think your family will be safe and sound after the three of us have paid such a big price? Qi Chengshan's mouth twitched a few times. He turned his head and slapped Qi Changxing's face, causing him to stagger and nearly fall to the ground. Brother Du, I'll transfer the remaining 500 million to your account after I'm done with this matter. Farewell. After saying that, Qi Chengshan quickly left with Qi Changxing. At the Everlasting Feast Hall's North Tower, more than 100 corpses had been dealt with, and the blood on the ground had been washed clean. However, a faint smell of blood still lingered in the hall. Are we going back to Jingmen Island tonight? Hao Lei, who wore a happy expression, looked at the restaurant's security guards who had finished cleaning, and left one after another. There's still something that hasn't been solved yet. Tianli shook her head and smiled. There's still something? What is it? A smile outlined on the corner of Tianli's mouth as she slowly said, there's still someone who hasn't come yet. If they don't come today, I'll personally come to collect the debt tomorrow. Who? Hao Lei was surprised. Qi Chengshan, said Tianli. Is tonight's matter also related to Qi Chengshan? Hao Lei frowned. Tianli shrugged her shoulders and smilingly said, he raised a good son who can bring disaster to him, so he naturally can't escape from this. Hao Lei nodded thoughtfully and suddenly said, Tianli, don't you feel that our current boss is a money-making machine? His income in just one night is more than the total income of the Everlasting Feast Hall and Grand Fortune Jewelry for more than 10 years. Chapter 281. A smile outlined on the corner of Tianli's mouth as she smilingly said, what? You think it's not good? Or is boss too ruthless? It's good to be ruthless. Hao Lei smiled and said, otherwise, how could we get such a huge amount? Big Boss hasn't appeared for a long time in the last decade, nor has he seen us. You also know Little Boss's temperament. He's indifferent to fame and fortune. Apart from dealing with the necessary affairs, he doesn't care about anything else and left everything to us. I was worried that our Everlasting Feast Hall's future development would be affected if this continued. But now it seems that my worries were groundless. Tianli nodded and said, I also have the same feeling. I'm very satisfied with the current boss, and he's very much to my liking. I believe that our everlasting feast hall will get better and better under his leadership. Hao Lei's smile disappeared. After seeing that only the two of them were left in the hall, she whispered, "Don't tell me you're not curious about our new boss?" Tianli was silent for a moment and slowly said, "I'm very curious." Hao Lei said, "Yeah. He's too mysterious. He suddenly appeared and became our everlasting feast hall's boss. Though he's very young, we don't know who he is. I even suspect that he comes from the same place as Big Boss." With a faint smile, Tianli looked at Hao Lei and asked, "Do you know where Big Boss comes from?" "I don't." Hao Lei shook her head. Tianli took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "No matter where Boss comes from, we only need to remember that our lives are given by Big Boss. We must unconditionally carry out any order from him. Also, our current boss may look amiable on the surface, but he's a ruthless and merciless person deep down. Therefore, we must maintain our respect at all times." "That's for sure," said Hao Lei. "Boss is willing to give us that opportunity, so I won't blink even if he wants me to die. Also, Before she could finish her words, a big man quickly came in from the hall's entrance. General Manager, Chief Hao, the Qi Group's president, Qi Qingshan, came with his son Qi Chongxing. "They're waiting outside," said the big man in a deep voice. Tianli raised her brows and sneered. "Did they come with their father and son? They didn't bring anyone else?" "No." "It seems that he heard the news," said Tianli lightly. "Let them in." "Yes." The muscular man nodded and strode away. Hao Lei shrugged her shoulders and said with a smile, "I'll leave the matters here to you. I'll go back and rest. Tomorrow, I'll deal with the matters in the jewelry store. At the latest, we must arrive at the Jingmen Island HQ the day after tomorrow. Lucky chance. Just thinking about it makes me excited." Tianli nodded and said, "Boss will leave tomorrow. We can go back the day after tomorrow." 2 minutes later, Tianli sat alone in the living room. Looking at Qi Chengshan and Qi Chongxing walking in, a cold expression hung on her face. "Director Tian." A wry smile hung on Qi Chengshan's face as he approached Tianli. "What's the matter?" asked Tianli lightly. Qi Chengshan took out a check from his pocket and handed it to Tianli, saying, "Chief Tian, I heard about what happened tonight. Here's 1 billion yuan. Consider it my apology to you and your everlasting feast hall's boss." Tianli didn't take the check. Instead she asked, "Who told you the news?" Qi Chengshan said, "Du Changza. He asked me for 1 billion yuan to buy the news from him." Tianli raised her brows and sneered. "That Du Changza really knows how to rip people off. Since you spent a lot of money to buy the news, I believe you already know the result of the matter. Do you think our everlasting feast hall will lack this 1 billion yuan?" Qi Chengshan bitterly said, "Chief Tian, I can't afford more money at the moment. I've paid 500 million yuan to Du Changza before, and I borrowed half of this 1 billion yuan from my friends. At the Jiang Group, Wanyuan Real Estate and Dukong Winery have more capital than me. Being able to come up with this amount of money in such a short time is already my limit." Upon hearing this, Tianli took the check and lightly said, "This matter is over. You can leave now." Qi Chengshan secretly felt relieved and quickly said, "Then, I won't bother you anymore. Goodbye." "Wait," Tianli suddenly said with a smile. "Remember to inform Du Changza after you leave. 1 billion yuan for no reason is a bit unreasonable." Qi Chengshan's expression moved. He immediately understood and said, "Don't worry. I'll definitely convey it." After leaving the everlasting feast hall, a sneer flashed on Qi Chengshan's face. After sitting in the car, he took out his mobile and dialed Du Changza's cell number. After his call was connected, he straightforwardly said, "Brother Du, thank you for the information you provided. I've solved this matter. However, before coming out of the everlasting feast hall, Tianli asked me to convey a message to you." "What is it?" asked Du Changza hurriedly. "She said that it's not good for you to eat it alone," said Qi Chengshan. "Eat it alone?" Du Changza, who had yet to rest at home, instantly had an unsightly expression. After being silent for a long while, he slowly said, "I know what to do." Goodbye. After the call ended, Qi Qingshan took back his mobile and turned to look at his son, Qi Chongxing, who was sitting next to him. If Qi Chongxing wasn't his son, he really wanted to strangle him with his own hands. In just one night, he had to take out 2 billion yuan. 2 billion yuan. Although the Qi family was a big family, taking out 2 billion yuan at once would be a huge blow to their foundation. Dad, I was wrong. I promise I won't get into trouble again in the future. Qi Chongxing knew his father's temperament and quickly said. For her, I must go there even if I don't want to. Tian Li's eyes flashed. She bowed her head to conceal it and said again, Boss, can I ask something? You can ignore me if you don't want to answer. Ask away. Tan Xiao said with a smile. You don't have to be so cautious in front of me. I can kill my enemies and make their blood flow like a river, leaving corpses everywhere. But I will never do that to my own people. Just be casual. Tian Li smiled and asked, Boss, we were raised by Big Boss since we were young. We wouldn't have lived until now if it weren't for Big Boss. But ever since we were young, Big Boss told us to look for someone named Tan Xiao no matter when and where we are. I think that person should be you, right? That's right, it's me, said Tan Xiao. Then your relationship with Boss is? Asked Tian Li. Yenner is my apprentice, said Tan Xiao lightly. What? Tian Li suddenly stood up with an incredulous look on her face. There are some things that you are not qualified to know for the time being, said Tan Xiao with a faint smile. If one day in the future, your cultivation can help me and you can follow me to another world, then you will understand. Another world? Tian Li looked at Tan Xiao with an aghast expression. Her lips couldn't help but tremble. A storm was set off inside her heart. It was because she never thought that there was another world apart from Earth. Boss, where is this other world you mentioned? You don't need to know it now, said Tan Xiao calmly. I'll tell you when you reach the immortal stage. Alright, that's all for today's inquiry. You're not allowed to tell anyone about what I told you. Understood, replied Tian Li respectfully. Tan Xiao waved his hand and motioned her to sit down and continue eating. I'm very sorry. The backstage is lagging today, so the third chapter was updated late. Please forgive me, brothers and sisters. Also, congratulations to Black Pot Sis for being promoted to the Immortal World Alliance Master. I'm very grateful for your strong support, brother. Chapter 282. The sun shone brightly on the earth. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Tan Xiao arrived at the Hong Kong airport with the Mo brothers. Since Mo On's flight was booked at 9:30 in the morning, there was only half an hour left before the departure. If they wanted to go to Nine Dragons Island, they must first go to Saipan, and then take a boat from Saipan to Nine Dragons Island. This trip, Tan Xiao brought several books in his suitcase, including Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor, Basic Business Theory, Nanotechnology, and Theory of Laser Instrument Development. Recently, Tan Xiao was particularly keen on reading books about science and technology, because there was no modern technology in the immortal world. Every civilization had its own essence of existence. Tan Xiao wanted to verify some of his ideas through the current technology. What made him somewhat satisfied was that he discovered that the current technology was truly amazing. Some seemingly ordinary points of knowledge actually contain mysterious laws. To kill time, the three of them quickly boarded the plane. As the plane took off, they arrived at Kobler International Airport in Saipan in the afternoon. The moment Tan Xiao stepped out of the plane, his spirit was shaken. The fresh air and the blue sky made him feel relaxed and happy. Boss, are we going to take a boat to Nine Dragons Island or rest in Saipan for a day? Or do you want to rest in Saipan for a day? Mo On had been to Saipan before and was quite familiar with the place, so he followed Tan Xiao and asked. Let's rent a boat and go straight to Nine Dragons Island, Tan Xiao said. Understood. Mo On immediately took out his mobile and dialed a number. A few minutes later, Mo On hung up the phone and looked at Tan Xiao, saying, Boss, I've rented a boat at the Red Sand Bay port. However, we need to buy some daily necessities before we set sail. After all, it will take about 2 days to get to Nine Dragons Island. Tan Xiao didn't want to pay attention to such trivial matters. After sitting in a taxi parked on the roadside, he said, "You arrange the details." Immediately he said in English, "Let's go to the Red Sand Bay port, sir." Red Sand Port. The burly black man, Tom Reggie, was smoking a thick cigar. He was wearing a beige sun hat, a checkered casual jacket, a pair of red trousers and slippers. He stood on the shore of the harbor and shouted, "Hurry up. Use the strength you used to work on women. Get the carry into the sea. I'm in a very good mood today. Whoever makes me unhappy, I'll smack their buttocks." On the beach, more than 100 naked men with bulging muscles were using pulleys to move a brand new liner into the sea bit by bit. The carry liner was more than 80 meters long and looked extremely luxurious. "Boss, he's here." A man quickly came before Tom Reggie and respectfully said. Tom Reggie turned around and looked at the three people walking dozens of meters away before his eyes finally fell on Mo On. After stepping forward to greet him, he made a strange gesture when he was still a dozen meters away from Mo On. Mo On responded with the same gesture. "Hey buddy, we haven't seen each other for 8 years, right?" Tom Reggie said with a smile in fluent English. "Yeah, 8 years and 6 months, said Mo On with a smile. "I thought you wouldn't live until now. I'm really surprised to see you now." Tom Reggie laughed and said, "There's an old saying in your country that good people don't live long, while scourges last for 1,000 years. Maybe I'm the scourge in your mouth. Is this your big boss?" "He's my boss," said Mo On. "I'm Tan Xiao." Tan Xiao extended his hand and nodded. Tom Reggie shook hands with Tan Xiao and said with a smile, "I really admire you, Mr. Tang. You can make Mo On your subordinate. I'm very curious. What kind of ability do you have? How about we have a contest? I'm very powerful." "Tom Reggie is very powerful, boss," said Mo On. "He once killed an adult African elephant with his bare hands." Tan Xiao shook his head and smilingly said, "You must be prepared to die if you want to compete with me. You can give it a try now if you want." No. We're friends. How can we have a life and death contest? What's more, Mo On is my friend and comrade. You're his boss, and he'll fight me if I kill you. To be honest, I'm not his match," said Tom Reggie while waving his hand. "Tom Reggie, I'm not your boss's match," said Mo On calmly. "What?" Tom Reggie stared blankly as a look of surprise appeared on his face. He knew Mo On's character, and knew that he would never lie. So to say, this young Mr. Tang was really very powerful? Tan Xiao didn't want to be entangled in this matter. He looked at the shore and asked, "Is that passenger ship going to be rented to us?" "It's the carry passenger ship that just left the factory and was transported here yesterday." Tom Reggie nodded. "The crew has been trained and is fully capable of operating this ship. The ship's service personnel are also in place and can board at any time." "We can't set sail tonight?" asked Tan Xiao with a frown. Tom Reggie shrugged his shoulders and said, "We could have set sail at night, but the Marine Meteorological Bureau just sent the news that there will be a small-scale tsunami at sea early tomorrow morning. To prevent any accidents from happening, I suggest you wait." "Tsunami?" Tan Xiao was silent for a moment before he slowly nodded and said, "If that's the case, then we can only wait for a day. On book the hotel." Tom Reggie smiled and said, "I've already arranged the hotel. It's the best resort in the vicinity. I've also prepared a banquet to welcome you." Tang Xiao let out a smile and nodded. "Thank you." "You're welcome," said Tom Reggie with a smile. "Who told me to owe Mo On's group a few lives?" "All right, I'll direct them to get the ship first. My men will take you to the resort to rest." On the way to the nearby resort, Tan Xiao asked Mo On, "Were you once comrades in arms?" Mo On nodded and said, "I used to belong to the same organization, and I carried out several missions with him. It was a very dangerous mission. We fought side by side many times and almost died many times. Aside from our people, he's one of the people I trust the most. I originally wanted to invite him to work for the Everlasting Feast Hall, but he refused." Tan Xiao nodded and said, "Everyone has their own aspirations. He seems to be living a good life now. Boss, although I haven't seen him for more than 8 years, I still know some news about him," said Mo On. He had a bad life a few years ago and offended the local tyrant here. The other party is very powerful and sent people to hunt him down for more than 2 years. I thought he was dead for sure, but I didn't expect that he would quietly return here and secretly kill his enemies. Then, he used another force to completely destroy his enemies while they were fighting for power and profit. Finally, he gained a foothold here. Since you and he have a life and death friendship, why didn't you help him even though you knew about his situation? Tanshio curiously asked. It's one's own life and one's own. If he dies, I'll take revenge for him, said Mo-an. But he must rely on himself if he wants to conquer the world. Also, I'm someone from the Everlasting Feast Hall, so I can't bring any trouble to my family. Tanshio slowly nodded and said, It seems that Yanner has trained you very well. We were raised by Big Boss. She saved our lives from human traffickers and provided us with clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. She spent a lot of money to train us. Our lives belong to the Everlasting Feast Hall. Tanshio fell into silence. He had trained a lot of people, but only a few of them could survive until the end. Those who survived were scattered all over the immortal world and rarely moved. Only once every 100 years would they come to pay a visit with offerings. There was strength in numbers. At this time, he was even more certain that his previous behavior was improper. He was more determined to train a large number of loyal, reliable, and powerful subordinates. Lao Bei Resort in Saipan. When Tanshio's group of 3 arrived, one of Tom Reggie's subordinates, a charming young woman, was already waiting there. Are you Mr. Tang? Jasmine walked over with her 10-centimeter high heels, swaying her slender waist. She was very beautiful with fair skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes. She was full of exotic charm. Yes. Tanshio nodded. Jasmine chuckled and said, My boss told me to take you to your residence after you arrive. Also, I've arranged some programs for you. You can choose whatever you like when the time comes. All the expenses will be borne by my boss. Lead the way. Tanshio was very curious about the program she mentioned. He followed Jasmine to the resort's interior and stayed in the best seascape villa. Mr. Tang, this is the program list. Do you want a full set of services? Or do you want to choose a few? Asked Jasmine with a smile. Tanshio took the program list, and his expression slightly moved after his eyes swept over it. It was because he didn't know what most of the programs were, but he had heard of some of them such as Thai massage, seabed diving, and ocean surfing. Let's have a Thai massage. Also, the 7 Goddesses Dance. That name is quite interesting. As for the rest, forget it. After saying that, Tanshio handed the program list to Mo-an and said with a smile, Let's treat today as a relaxing trip. You two also choose some. Mo-an's mouth immediately revealed a smile when he heard the programs Tanshio picked, especially the 7 Goddesses Dance. However, he handed the program list to Mo-ao and said with a smile, I'm not interested in these programs, boss. Also, I need to prevent strangers from disturbing you in an unfamiliar place. Ao likes to play, so let him pick. Mo-a didn't refuse and skillfully picked a few programs. Looking at Tanshio, Jasmine's eyes turned into crescent moons. Please come with me, Mr. Tang. As for Mr. Ao, someone will take you to him later. Please wait for a while. Although the recommendation votes have barely reached the required number, the monthly votes are just too pitiful. Brothers and sisters, please give 2 monthly votes to Quiet Night on account that he releases 3 chapters a day. I'll be eternally grateful. Chapter 283. Tanshio smiled and didn't speak again. He didn't have any intention to show off. He didn't even mention that Qin Zhizhong was his disciple. After all, today was the first time he met Fatty Li. Although he liked his candid character, there was no need to brag. Fatty Li, on the other hand, didn't seem to want to talk about Qin Zhizhong and Tang Xiu anymore. Instead, he talked about the local conditions and customs of Saipan, as well as the entertainment that men liked. Little brother, you should have chosen some programs in this resort villa, right? Tell me, what did you choose? Fatty Old Li suddenly asked with a faint smile. Nothing much, I just chose 2, said Tanshio. One is the Thai massage we're doing. The other one is the 7 Goddesses Dance. This name is quite interesting. Fatty Lee stared blankly. His eyes almost protruded out as he exclaimed. What did you say? You chose the 7 goddesses dance? Oh my god, that's amazing. That's really amazing. Damn it, this Fatty Lee is old and can't afford to play this kind of sports with too much exercise. Subsequently, a bit of envy appeared on his face as he said, It's great to be young. If I were to go back to the past, I'd still not dare to order the 7 goddesses dance, but I'd still like to see it. At the side, whether it was the masseuse for Tanxiu or the masseuse for Fatty Lee, including the 2 young girls, all of them looked at Tanxiu with a different expression. Among the 4 girls, 3 of them had a fiery look in their eyes. What exactly is the 7 goddesses dance? Tanxiu was confused. You don't know? Fatty Lee was surprised. I don't know. Tanxiu shook his head. I just thought the name sounded nice, so I just ordered it. Ha ha ha. Fatty Lee burst into laughter, tears flowing down from his eyes. He looked at Tanxiu with eyes full of ridicule. After his laughter subsided a bit, he said, Little brother, this big brother rarely admires people. But today I admire you. You don't even know what the 7 goddesses dance is, yet you still dare to order it? As for what it is, I won't tell you now. You'll know when you get there. Haha. Let's exchange contact information later. I really want to see what you look like after enjoying the 7 goddesses dance. Haha. Tanxiu looked at him and became even more curious about the 7 goddesses dance. However, since the other party was keeping him in suspense, he couldn't be bothered to ask further. Wasn't it just enjoying the service? No matter what ability he had, no matter what the service was, he could afford it. After the Thai massage. After Tanxiu got dressed, he realized that Fatty Lee, who had finished his Thai massage half an hour earlier than him, had not left. Instead, he was drinking fragrant tea and smoking a thick cigar in the side hall, resting on the sofa. Io, little brother. How do you feel about the Thai massage? When Fat Old Lee saw Tanxiu coming out, he immediately asked with a smile. Tanxiu nodded and said, Not bad. Fatty Old Lee stood up and said with a smile, Lil bro, the 7 goddesses dance is usually played at night. How about we go somewhere else to have some fun? Where to? Tanxiu asked with a puzzled expression. The casino. Fatty Old Lee grinned. Tanxiu stared blankly and hesitated for a moment before he slowly nodded and said, All right, let's go to the casino to have some fun. But I'm a poor man and don't have much capital. Fatty Old Lee said with a smile. It's all right. It's fate for us brothers to meet each other. I'll help you pay for the gambling in the casino today. Your big brother may not be very rich, but it's not a problem for me to take out 8 million to have some fun. No need. Tanxiu shook his head. Fatty Old Lee waved and said, Do as you wish. Buy some chips if you have the money to play. Just tell me if you're short of money. We came out for a vacation to have fun. Tanxiu nodded with a smile. He could clearly feel a faint aura coming from Fatty Old Lee. It was the aura of a superior. Since he was not a political official, he probably had a high position in the business world. 8 million was probably a small amount of money not worth mentioning in his eyes. Gambling. He knew how to restrain himself. This Fatty Old Lee was not simple. Tanxiu sighed inwardly and walked outside with him. When they came to the outermost hall, Jasmine and Mo On came over. Mr. Tang, are you satisfied with the Thai massage? Tanxiu said with a smile. It's not bad. I feel very comfortable now. Jasmine glanced at Fatty Old Lee and then asked with a smile again. Are you going to try the 7 goddesses dance now? Or? Tanxiu said with a smile. There's no need to rush the 7 goddesses dance. I'll follow this big brother to the casino to play first. On, go back and rest. I don't need you to follow me now. Understood. Mo On immediately replied after hearing it. Fatty Old Lee looked at Jasmine, and then at Mo On. Then he immediately asked in surprise, Little brother, they are. She seems to be a staff member here, and that one is my subordinate, Tanxiu said with a smile. Your subordinate is not simple. Fatty Old Lee was surprised. Look at his steady footsteps and strong physique. He should be a martial artist. I didn't expect that little brother would bring a bodyguard when you come out to play. Tan Xiao didn't explain and just faintly smiled. Jasmine took out a business card from her pocket and handed it to Fatty Old Li, saying with a smile, "Hello, sir. I'm the deputy manager of this Lao Bay Resort Villa. You can call me Jasmine or Manager Jasmine. Mr. Tang is our VIP here, so I'm personally accompanying you." Deputy manager? VIP? For the first time, Fatty Old Li faced Tan Xiao's identity. It must be noted that this Lao Bay Resort Villa was a large high-end resort villa with a very strong background. Being able to become the deputy manager here meant that his status was definitely not simple. She personally accompanied Tan Xiao and even called Tan Xiao a VIP here. Tan Xiao's identity was definitely not simple, right? "Li Laozhan, this is my business card." Fatty Old Li also handed a business card to Jasmine. "Mr. Li, I'll inform the villa's reception manager. Since you're Mr. Tang's friend, then I'll tell him to give you a 40% discount. This is the highest authority I can give you." Looking at Tan Xiao with a strange expression, Fatty Old Li couldn't help laughing and said, "I didn't expect that I would get to know a little brother by doing a Thai massage, and even benefited from this little brother. All right, then I'll thank you." Jasmine nodded with a smile. "You don't need to follow me here, Jasmine," said Tan Xiao. "Go do your own thing. Just send someone to inform me if Tom Regis comes at dinner time." "All right." Jasmine chuckled and nodded. As Jasmine left, Fatty Old Li grabbed Tan Xiao's shoulder and said with a grin, "Little brother, you're not being honest. You can make the deputy manager of this resort villa personally accompany you. You're not just a student with a small business, right? Hurry up and tell me the truth. What kind of immortal are you?" Tan Xiao shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, "I also benefited from my subordinate's light. My subordinate and Jasmine's boss are good friends who have been through life and death together. So, you know what I mean." Fatty Old Li suddenly understood and said with a smile, "Seeing that we're both benefiting from others, let's go to the casino. Today's a lucky day. I believe my luck will also be good." All right. Shortly after, under Fatty Old Li's lead, the duo came to the Lao Bay Resort's casino. The casino occupied a large area of 2 floors, and the first floor was the public casino hall. There were many people gambling inside, with all kinds of gambling devices, and a lot of people gathered in front of them. The second floor was a private box, and no one was eligible to enter unless they were gambling over 100 million yuan. Fatty Old Li led Tang Xiao to the counter in the innermost part of the counter to exchange the chips. He didn't exchange much, only 1 million. Tan Xiao also exchanged 1 million. "What do you want to play, little brother?" asked Fatty Old Li curiously. Tan Xiao shook his head and said, "I don't know much about the gambling in the casino, so I don't know what to bet. You go play first. I'll study the gambling machines here. After I'm familiar with them, I'll try my luck." Fatty Old Li shook his head and said, "It's boring to play alone. What do you want to know? I'll explain it to you. Let us brothers compete today and see who wins more." "Aren't you afraid of losing all your money?" Tan Xiao said with a smile. Fatty Old Li raised his brows and grinned. "If I lose all my money, I'll lose it all. Just consider it as playing the 7 goddesses dance. Let's go. Let's take a stroll first." The atmosphere in the casino was very lively. Many gamblers placed their bets, and the winners were overjoyed and excited. The losers were dejected and looked bitter. Fatty Old Li was a frequent visitor to the casino, and he knew the gambling machines here like the hair on his head. He even taught Tan Xiao some gambling tricks like a grandmaster gambling master. After taking a stroll, Fatty Old Li's mouth and tongue were dry from explaining. He picked up a glass of red wine from the tray held by the waiter, took a sip and asked, "What do you want to play, little brother? Today, I'm going to go against you. I'll play whatever you play. Let's have a match." "Let's go play dice," Tan Xiao said with a smile. "Let's go." Fatty Old Li nodded. "Buy big, buy small, buy big. This one is good. It's simple and crude. It's what I, Fatty Old Li, am good at." When they arrived at the place to play dice, there were a lot of people gathered here. The dealer was a middle-aged woman, and there were various places with different multiples on the table. "Ladies and gentlemen, hurry up and place your bets." As the dealer's voice ended, The gamblers around put their chips representing money on the places they wanted to place. Tan Xiu didn't rush to make a move, and just quietly watched. On the contrary, Fatty Old Li found that Tan Xiu wasn't in a hurry to place his bet. So he casually put 2 chips worth 10,000 yuan on the table. Buy big. For 5, 6, 15 points. If it was 15 points, then he would earn 10 times. If it was not 4, 5, 6, then he would lose 20,000 yuan. The dealer's dice shaking technique was very fast and had a high frequency. Tan Xiu had learned the dice listening technique from Jiarui Dao. After the dealer put the dice cover on the table, he secretly shook his head, knowing that Fatty Old Li would lose 20,000 yuan for sure. It's been several days since the third roll. Brothers and sisters, come and buy some more tickets to refresh your mind. Thank you very much. Chapter 284. Sure enough, when the dealer opened the cover of the dice, the numbers of the 3 dice inside were 2, 3, and 3. It was a small gamble. Except for one person who won some money. The rest of the gamblers all lost. Experts don't win 3 rounds. Fatty Old Li lost 20,000 yuan in a moment, but he didn't care about it. Instead, he looked at Tan Xiu and said with a smile. This amount of money was probably only enough for a meal for him. Not even enough to buy branded clothes. Seeing that he was about to place another bet, Tan Xiu pulled his arm and calmly said, "Let's go somewhere else. I suddenly don't want to play dice anymore." Fatty Old Li stared blankly for a moment. Then he indifferently spread his hands and smilingly said, "Do you think it's very difficult to win money? In fact, it's very difficult to win money in the casino. What's the saying? 9 out of 10 gambles lose, that's what it means." 9 out of 10 gambles lose, no? Tan Xiu smilingly said. There's still one person who wins. Everyone has a fluke mentality, and their nature is also greedy. That's why the casino is so prosperous. You're right. Fatty Old Li nodded and praised. Everyone has greed in their heart, but it depends on whether they can control it. We all know the saying, small gambling is good for the mood, but big gambling is bad for the body. But the greed of gamblers is very difficult to control. For example, there are several local tycoons gambling on the 2nd floor tonight. They're going to spend a lot of money. Local tycoons? Gambling? Isn't this resort a place for leisure and entertainment? Tan Xiu stared blankly and asked in surprise. How come there are people coming here to gamble? Fatty Old Li snorted and said, Humph, it's because they have nothing better to do and have money to burn. However, I heard that there's a small grudge between them, so they naturally have to compete after meeting here. I also heard that the one from Qingqing Mountain is a disciple of the gambling sage from Las Vegas. He's going to win big tonight. The one from Qingqing Mountain? Tan Xiu was surprised. Who is he? Fatty Old Li turned to look around and lowered his voice, saying, He's a small charlatan who used to play tricks. Later on, he set foot in the business world and used his accumulated connections to get several coal mines with good output in the Northwest. He had made a lot of money over the years. Little brother, you must remember that that kid is a shrewd person. If you meet him in the future, you must be more careful. Tan Xiu nodded thoughtfully. As they spoke, the two of them arrived in front of a roulette machine. If you want to play this game, it is very simple. You just have to put the chips into the entrance of the roulette machine, and the machine will identify them. If it was a chip with 10,000 points, it could only be exchanged for 1,000 points. Each point was worth $1. In other words, the amount of money invested in the roulette machine was equivalent to 10 times less. However, the roulette was divided into multiples, the lowest being 0 times. If the needle in the roulette machine finally pointed to the 0 times region, it would be tantamount to losing everything and not getting a single cent. In addition, from high to low, they were 0 times, 1 times, 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 50 times, 100 times, 200 times, 500 times, 1,000 times. From 0 to 50 times, there were 2 regions, while from 100 to 1,000 times, there was only 1 region. At this moment, in front of the 6 roulette machines, a total of 3 gamblers were playing. A smile outlined on the corner of Tan Xiu's mouth. He looked at Fatty Old Li and said, How about we play this? It's simple and crude. Winning or losing depends on luck. Fatty Oldly hesitated and said, I don't think it's as simple as relying on luck. Generally, this kind of gambling machine has been calibrated, and it's very difficult to rotate more than 100 times region. Tan Xiu lightly smiled and said, even if it's been calibrated, it's still possible. After all, we're playing with the machine, and it's much better than those dealers, no? Fatty Oldly nodded and smilingly said, you're right. Those who can be dealers in this casino are all experts. Even if they want to cheat, I'm afraid they can do it. Then let's play this game, and see who wins the most in the end. All right. Tan Xiu faintly smiled and stood in front of one of the roulette machines. He reached out to put a chip representing 10,000 yuan into the machine's entrance, and then pressed the start button. Buzz! The needle in the roulette machine began to rotate violently. 10 seconds later, the needle pointed to the 10 times region. In other words, Tan Xiu didn't win or lose this round. Fatty Oldly also stood in front of another roulette machine, and like Tan Xiu, inserted a chip representing 10,000 yuan. After pressing the start button, the needle finished rotating and finally stopped at the 50 times region. Ha ha ha. I told you that my luck is good. I've earned 5 times. Fatty Oldly glanced at Tan Xiu. He had been paying attention to Tan Xiu's gambling results. After comparing, he found that he won, while Tan Xiu didn't lose or win. A proud look immediately appeared on his face. Fatty Oldly, you said before that experts don't win 3 rounds. Tan Xiu said with a smile. Fatty Oldly rolled his eyes and grinned. Hee hee, you also believe that? I can't wait to win all the rounds from the first to the last. Tan Xiu couldn't help laughing. His eyes lit up as he directly pressed the start button. At the same time, he quickly released his spiritual force and integrated it into the roulette machine. The needle inside rotated rapidly. Tan Xiu had already controlled its rotation speed and gradually reduced it. Under his deliberate control, the needle pointed to the 1,000 times region. At this moment, Fatty Oldly also had the result. When he saw that the needle stopped at the 1 times region, the smile on his face became brighter. While laughing, he looked at the result on the roulette machine in front of Tan Xiu. What? The smile on his face instantly froze. He didn't even care about the roulette machine in front of him as he strode to the front of Tan Xiu and exclaimed with wide eyes. 1,000 times? How many values did you get just now? 1,000 points? 1,000 times is 1 million? Tan Xiu nodded with a smile and said, you're right. Fatty Oldly seemed to have suffered a blow. He resentfully returned to the roulette machine he was controlling and hummed. You're fucking lucky. Although I'm not as good as you, it's still more than double. It was 50,000 points just now, and now it's 100,000. Tan Xiu smiled and found that his spiritual sense could indeed control the roulette needle. He decided to keep his good luck. Moreover, he would only play once and no longer gamble. He pressed the start button. As the roulette machine's needle began to rotate, Tan Xiu's spiritual sense once again entangled the rotating needle and controlled it to finally stop at the 1,000 times region. Motherfucker. It's 0. I've lost everything. Fatty Oldly cursed and resentfully turned to look at the roulette in front of Tan Xiu, as well as the red numerical values displayed above the roulette. When he saw the series of zeros, his expression suddenly became dumbfounded. I'm sorry. Due to the huge amount of gambling money you've won, the machine can't spit out the corresponding value of the chips. Please contact the casino staff. A mechanical sound came from the roulette machine. In an instant, the men and women in front of the 3 roulette machines nearby looked at Tan Xiu one after another. When they moved their feet and saw the values displayed on the roulette machine in front of Tan Xiu, each and every one of them stared with disbelief. Over here. Tan Xiu turned to look at a middle-aged man dressed as a casino staff nearby and waved at him. What can I do for you, sir? The middle-aged man asked politely with a smile. Tan Xiu pointed to the value displayed on the roulette machine and lightly said, if my guess is correct, I think I've hit the jackpot. It's 1 billion, right? The middle-aged man looked at the string of red numbers with a shocked expression on his face. After he counted it, he found that the value displayed was indeed 1 billion. In an instant, cold sweat appeared on his forehead. With a respectful look on his face, he quickly said, "Please wait a moment, sir. I don't have the authority to handle it since the amount you've won is too big. I'll go ask our manager to come down now." "All right." Tanshio nodded. Many gamblers in the surroundings had heard the staff's words. When they saw the red value on the roulette machine, they were shocked. In just half a minute, dozens of people gathered around. Furthermore, the commotion here was too big, attracting the attention of the gamblers in the entire casino hall. Many people also rushed over, wanting to find out what was going on. Tagger, the Lao Bay Resort's casino manager, was a man with real power. When he received a call from his staff, he immediately rushed over, and also contacted the resort's vice president, Jasmine. "Hello, sir. I'm the manager of this casino. Since you've won quite a lot of money, please come with me to the VIP room." Tagger came before Tanshio and said, "At the side." From Tagger's words, Fatty Lee could hear some hidden meaning and said in a deep voice, "Tanshio is my little brother. We're together. You invited him to the VIP room instead of going to the VIP room to handle the payment procedure. What does this mean? Does your casino want to renege on the debt?" Tagger did indeed have such a thought. He needed to investigate Tanshio's background. If Tanshio was just an ordinary tourist without a powerful force backing him, he wouldn't mind making Tanshio disappear from this world forever. After all, 1 billion was not a small number. However, Fatty Lee Minrue was aware of his thoughts and even said it out in public, which made him angry inwardly. On the surface, he still looked refined and courteous as he shook his head and said, "Discussing and handling the matter are the same. I hope you don't misunderstand, sir. Also, I've notified the vice president of our resort. She's on her way here, and I believe she'll receive you soon." "The Lao Bay Resort's vice president? Isn't that Jasmine?" Fatty Lee's tense mood immediately relaxed after hearing it. Tanshio calmly nodded and said, "Then let's go to the VIP room and talk in detail. I'm sure you won't let me down." Tagger secretly sneered inwardly, but his attitude became more amiable on the surface. He smiled and said, "You can rest assured that we won't let you down. This month's monthly votes are really too miserable. I can't even muster up the courage to write some words. Brothers and sisters, please help me so that silent night can break out." Chapter 285. In the VIP room on the second floor, Tagger warmly greeted Tanshio and Fatty Lee to take a seat. At this time, Fatty Lee's mood was particularly complicated. He didn't expect that he would invite Tanshio to the resort hotel to play, but Tanshio would actually win 1 billion yuan. 1 billion yuan. He ran such a big business, yet his net income for a year was probably not that much. Envy, jealousy, and hatred were the truest portrayal of his heart. But he also faintly felt that this matter was a bit troublesome. After all, those who could open a casino were not good people. They were not willing to hand over such a huge sum of money just like that. Tanshio is too young after all. He shouldn't be able to see the crux of the problem. Fatty Lee sighed inwardly and secretly decided that if the other party really wanted to renege on the debt, he wouldn't make a scene here. After all, a strong dragon couldn't suppress a local snake, and it was extremely difficult to take advantage of others in their territory. "How about we talk about it?" Tagger sat down opposite the two of them, lit a cigarette, and crossed his legs. "What do you want to talk about?" asked Tanshio calmly. "We're all smart people and I don't want to beat around the bush with you," said Tagger with a smile. "Our casino's business is good, and we make a lot of money every year. But 1 billion is too big, and I even suspect that you did something to the machine. So you can't take 1 billion. "You mean you want to renege on the debt?" Tanshio lightly said. Tagger's smile turned more brilliant, but the chilling light in his eyes was getting more intense. He looked at Tanshio, shook his head and smilingly said, "May I know your surname, sir?" "Tang," said Tanshio. "You may be young, but I think you're a smart man, Mr. Tang," said Tagger with a smile. "Some money can be taken, and some can't. What I want to say is that this is Kaipan, our turf. Even if we give you 1 billion yuan, I'm afraid you won't have a life to spend it. Why don't our casino give you 10 million, and we can settle this privately? What do you think?" "You're really ruthless, Mr. Tagger. praised Tanxio with a smile. Subtract 99% from me at a stroke, and dismiss me with 1%. Do you think I'm someone who is short of 10 million? Tagger stared blankly for a moment before he immediately frowned and asked, Mr. Tang, could it be that you didn't understand what I just said? Some money. Others could not spend it even if they had their lives. Do you think you can leave Saipan alive with such a huge sum of money? Tanxio said confidently, I think I can. The smile on Tagger's face completely disappeared, and was replaced by a bit of gloominess. He took a deep drag on his cigarette and narrowed his eyes at Tanxio. He did not believe that Tanxio would be able to leave Saipan alive after getting his hands on $1 billion. He couldn't even take the money and leave the city. His boss. He was a rich and powerful character. Lao Bei Resort was backed by several powerful shareholders of Saipan. Each of them had enormous power. It could be said that no one in Saipan would dare to provoke them if these several bosses joined forces. Where is he? Jasmine's voice came from outside the VIP room. In this VIP room. A deep male voice answered. As Jasmine's figure appeared at the door, a faint smile appeared on Tanxio's face. Fatty Li, on the other hand, was a bit worried. He didn't know whether Tanxio's face was big enough for Jasmine to treat him as a VIP and let him get the money. Jasmine entered the VIP room. When her eyes fell on Tanxio and Fatty Li, she looked slightly surprised. Then she immediately came before Tanxio and said with a smile, Mr. Tang, did you win 1 billion in the casino? Tanxio let out a light smile and said, You can't stop your luck when it comes. I was just a bit careless and won some money. However, your resort is very powerful. The person in charge of the casino is going to renege on the debt. Also, if I didn't hear it wrong, he's threatening me. Upon seeing Jasmine's arrival, Tagger immediately extinguished his cigarette and stood up with a respectful expression. However, when he heard Jasmine and Tanxio's words, he was slightly stunned with a strange expression on his face. It was because he didn't expect that Jasmine would know Tanxio. Jasmine slightly furrowed her brows. She turned to look at Tagger and said in a deep voice, Apologize to Mr. Tang. Tagger was very afraid of Jasmine. He knew her identity. She was one of his boss's women, and also the person he trusted the most. I'm sorry, Mr. Tang. Tanxio let out a faint smile as he looked at Jasmine and asked, Do you think I'm qualified to get the money I won? Jasmine hesitated for a moment before she respectfully said, I can't make the decision on this matter, Mr. Tang. Can you give me some time to ask my boss? All right. Tanxio made a gesture to invite her. Red Sand Bay Port. Tom Reggie wiped the beads of sweat on his forehead. After seeing that the workers had pushed the liner into the sea, he finally felt relieved. At this moment his mobile phone rang. What's up? Boss, Mr. Tang, Tanxio has won 1 billion yuan in our casino. Do you have any instructions? Tom Reggie's expression slightly changed and he fell into silence. He didn't tell Tanxio and Mo On that the Lao Bei Resort was his property, of which he owned 51% of the shares. Therefore, Tanxio shouldn't have deliberately won his money in the casino. Moreover, he was very curious about Tanxio's true identity. He believed that Tanxio's identity was definitely not simple since he could make Mo On his subordinate. He knew Mo On very well, a terrifying character that was more powerful than him. When they first met, their strength was perhaps the same. But in the following years, Mo On became more and more powerful, to the extent that he had to retreat. Moreover, when he saw Tanxio today, he found something that made him faintly restless. Apart from Mo On, there was also a big man who looked like Mo On. His whole body exuded a dense aura that made him secretly apprehensive. He was sure that the other party was also a powerful character. 1 billion yuan. He didn't care about it. He cared about his friendship with Mo On and Tanxio's identity. Tom Reggie was silent for half a minute before he slowly said, Give it to him. If he wants to continue playing in the casino, then let him continue to play. Boss, how should we explain to the others? Asked Jasmine with a frown. I'll inform them that this 1 billion yuan is my own, said Tom Reggie in a deep voice. Jasmine's heart was shaken as a shocked expression burst out from her eyes. She didn't expect that her boss would make such a decision. What was Tanxio's identity? To be able to make her boss not hesitate to give away 1 billion yuan? I got it, boss. Jasmine replied and returned to the VIP room. The smile on her face turned thicker and her attitude turned more respectful as she said, Mr. Tang, our boss said that if you want to continue playing in the casino, then you can play to your heart's content. Also, give me your account number. I'll send someone to transfer 1 billion yuan to your account later. What? Tagger was shocked. He looked at Tan Xiao with disbelief and fear inside. He didn't expect that his big boss would be willing to hand over the money to the other party. This young man, what kind of terrifying identity and background does he have? Tan Xiao said with a smile. Let's go find Mo on later. Just transfer the money to his account. I don't feel like playing anymore, and I'm not going to stay in the casino anymore. Pass my message to Tom Reggie. He's a good guy. All right. Jasmine nodded and replied with a smile. Suddenly, her expression moved and she said softly, Mr. Tang, since you like gambling, why don't you stay and watch the big gamble later? It seems that one of them is from your country. Big gamble? Tan Xiao recalled what Fatty Oldly said before and immediately showed a bit of interest. Fatty Oldly was extremely curious about Tan Xiao's identity at the moment. He would have asked again if it wasn't in front of Jasmine and Tagger. At this moment, his eyes lit up upon hearing Jasmine's words and he quickly said, Brother Tang, this kind of big gamble scene is very rare to see. In particular, the participation of that Ching Ching Mountain fella is even rarer. Shall we stay and watch? Tan Xiao pondered for a while before he nodded and said, Let's watch then. Jasmine said with a smile, There's still more than half an hour before the big gamble begins. Would the two of you like to eat something first? I'll tell the kitchen to arrange it. Tan Xiao recalled that he still had to dine with Tom Reggie in the evening, so he immediately shook his head and said, Forget it. In any case, it's only half an hour. I'll accompany Fatty Oldly to play downstairs. All right, Jasmine said. I'll send someone to take you to the VIP lounge to watch the big gamble when the big gamble begins. As Jasmine and Tagger left, Fatty Oldly immediately looked at Tan Xiao with a rare solemn expression and seriously asked, Brother Tang, this old brother Fatty has confided his heart to you, yet you're still hiding something from me? Tell me, who exactly are you? Why is the big boss of this Lao Bei resort somewhat afraid of you? I told you that the boss of this Lao Bei resort is a life and death friend of one of my men, said Tan Xiao. Fatty Oldly shook his head and said, In today's society, there are very few people who would pay 1 billion just for a friend. Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing and said, If you can really confide in a friend, will you take out 1 billion for him? Of course. Fatty Oldly replied without hesitation. Immediately after, his expression turned blank. He then forced a wry smile and said, Forget it. Since you don't want to say it, then I won't ask. In any case, when I first met you, I thought you were just a fellow countryman who came here for a vacation. Our revolutionary friendship is very pure, very pure. It's indeed very pure, Tan Xiao said with a faint smile. But I seem to remember that someone wants to compete with me in this casino. Fatty Oldly, you won't admit defeat so easily, right? Of course, with your straightforward personality, if you really decided to admit defeat, you would also say it out loud. Am I right? Chapter 286. Fatty Oldly rolled his eyes and snappily scolded. You stinking brat. You know I can't win 1 billion in this casino, yet you still deliberately set me up. I admit defeat. I admit defeat. God damn it, I don't have such a powerful deterrent force like you. If I win 1 billion and get it, I'm afraid my body will be thrown into the sea to feed the sharks tonight. Tan Xiao didn't doubt Fatty Oldly's words. He was well aware of the character of those casino owners. Whether it was in this world or in the immortal world, those who ran casinos were not good people. It was common for them to kill people and rob their goods for money. Let's go. I'll accompany you downstairs to play. As the duo went downstairs to the hall, many people's eyes fell on Tan Xiao. Although many people envied Tan Xiao for winning 1 billion, more people were full of sympathy for him. Obviously, they also knew some unspoken rules of the casino. Tan Xiao ignored the expressions of the others and accompanied Fatty Oldly. asking with a smile. What are you going to play? I still have 990,000 chips left, so I'll play whatever you play. I'm good with anything. I can play anything, but I can't play anything well. Fatty Oldly laughed. Half an hour later, Fatty Oldly lost more than 1 million chips in his hand, while Tanshio also lost more than half of the 990,000 chips in his hand. He exchanged the remaining 300,000 to 400,000 chips into cash, and also got a suitcase from the casino. Gentlemen, our vice president asked me to take you to the VIP lounge on the second floor. A handsome young man with a well-proportioned figure came to Tang Xiu and Fatty Old Li's side with a face full of respect. Lead the way. 2 minutes later, they came to a spacious VIP lounge on the second floor. At this time, there were already dozens of people in the VIP lounge, standing outside the railings on both sides of the hall, watching the 4 people on the gambling table inside. Behind each of the 4 people stood one person. For people, 2 of them were men in their 30s, an old man in his 50s, and a blonde beauty whose age couldn't be seen. Fatty Oldly gently touched Tanshio's arm and whispered, "See that guy with a crew cut and monkey-like chin? He was Wang Rui from Mount Qingcheng. He's 34 years old this year, but has a net worth of tens of billions." Tanshio's gaze lingered on Wang Rui for a moment before he glanced at the other 2. Finally, his gaze fell on the blonde beauty. His brows knit together slightly while a trace of vigilance appeared in his eyes, because he acutely noticed that the woman's body was flowing with a unique aura. This aura wasn't something that only cultivators or immortal cultivators could possess, and it seemed to belong to a clansman called the White Wing clan from the immortal dimension instead. She's very powerful. I'm afraid that the current me is no match for her. Tanshio noticed that the beautiful girl seemed to have sensed something and looked in his direction. He immediately averted his gaze and was secretly shocked. At this moment, the game on the gambling table had already begun. Each of them had a pile of chips in front of them. The dealer in charge of issuing cards was a middle-aged foreign man. Are they playing blackjack? Tanshio raised his eyebrows and whispered. That's right, blackjack. Fatty Oldly nodded. I don't like Wang Rui much, but his opponent is a Japanese shorty, so I hope Wang Rui can win. At the very least, he must win glory for our country and strike a heavy blow to this Japanese shorty's arrogance. Although Tanshio didn't have a favorable impression of this Japanese shorty, he didn't feel like paying attention to this country's gambler. The one he was most interested in was the blonde beauty. The game began. Wang Rui didn't bet much in the beginning, and it was precisely because of this that the Japanese shorty was very arrogant and mocked Wang Rui several times. Even the Western old man also chimed in. The beautiful girl, on the other hand, had a faint smile on her face. She didn't seem to care whether her cards were big or small. She and Wang Rui didn't even bet much in the beginning. Finally, after a dozen rounds, Wang Rui suddenly raised the price and even bet tens of millions of chips. Although the Japanese shorty clamored fiercely, he was also a shrewd man. He didn't raise the bet again and chose to give up. The blonde beauty also gave up. However, the Western old man pushed out tens of millions of chips with a face full of disdain and continued to bet. The result was naturally Wang Rui's win. 20 minutes later, the game progressed to the most intense stage. Wang Rui constantly whispered to the Western middle-aged man behind him and kept raising the bet. The Japanese shorty was not to be outdone, and even the Western old man also followed. On the contrary, the beautiful girl had already given up. Brother Tang, the chips on the table have already exceeded 500 million. Who do you think will win this game? Fatty Oldly gently touched Tanshio and asked in a low voice. Tanshio slowly said, the Japanese shorty. Humph. A middle-aged man next to Tanshio and Fatty Oldly heard the conversation between Tanshio and Fatty Oldly and sneered at them. Tanshio glanced at him before his eyes fell back on the gambling table. He had just used his spiritual sense to observe the 3 people's cards, and found that the Japanese shorty had the biggest cards. If Wang Rui didn't have any other means, he would definitely lose this game. However, what everyone didn't expect was that Wang Rui suddenly gave up. In the end, the Western old man also lost to the Japanese shorty. Haha. Wang Ruijuan, you've lost most of your chips. If you keep this up, You'll soon leave the casino naked. The Japanese shorty was very arrogant as he mocked and ridiculed Wang Rui. Wang Rui coldly smiled and didn't answer. The next game began. Wang Rui directly pushed all his chips and lightly said, I still have 200 million left. If I lose again, it proves that I'm not as good as you. Let's begin. I'm in. The Japanese shorty looked at his cards and immediately pushed out 200 million chips with a face full of smiles. The Western old man also followed. Even the beautiful girl followed with 200 million. In the end, Wang Rui won the game. Not only did he win back the 300 million he lost, but he also won another 300 million. Baka, continue. The Japanese shorty angrily said. The next game, Wang Rui directly pushed out 400 million and lightly said, the chips on the table are not enough for each of you, but I'm willing to use these 400 million chips to gamble with you. If you win, I'll give you 400 million chips. But if you lose, the game will be completely over unless you exchange for more chips. The beautiful girl raised her brows. When her eyes suddenly turned to Tan Xiao, she found that Tan Xiao was looking at her. She immediately nodded to Tan Xiao and then got up and said, I give up. You guys play. I'm in. I'm in. The Japanese shorty and the Western old man said at the same time. As a result, Wang Rui won again, and won all the chips from both of them. Just as Wang Rui was mocking the Japanese shorty with satisfaction, the beautiful girl came to Tan Xiao. She didn't speak and just stared at Tan Xiao without blinking under the dozens of gazes. What's the matter, beauty? Asked Tan Xiao with an indifferent smile. The beautiful girl chuckled and said, I like young talents, especially strong ones like you. How about we play if you don't mind? Tan Xiao shook his head and said, a small gamble is good for the mood, but a big one is bad for the body. I don't like gambling, so I can't accompany you. The beautiful girl smiled and said, since you don't want to gamble, how about we find a quiet place and have a drink together? I'm very curious about you, to be honest. Tan Xiao was silent for a moment and then slowly said, I'm also very curious about you. I'll have a private party later. You can go with me if you don't mind. Okay. The beautiful girl made a gesture and said, I'll go back and change my clothes first. Tell me where you live. I'll find you later. All right. Tan Xiao told her the villa's number, and then said to Fatty Oldly, let's go. Fatty Oldly looked at the beautiful girl's back as she left and asked in surprise, Brother Tang, do you know that rich woman? I don't know her. Tan Xiao shook his head. A strange expression appeared on Fatty Oldly's face as he said, You're really amazing, Brother Tang. Not only do you have heaven-defying luck, even rich women and beautiful women throw themselves into your arms. How come this Fatty Oldly doesn't have such a good thing? It's unfair. The heavens are really unfair. You think that woman is good? Tan Xiao said with a smile. Do you want me to send her to your room later? No, no, no. A gentleman doesn't take someone's love. You keep that woman to enjoy. Fatty Oldly waved his hand again and again. Then he said in a low voice, Actually, I'm not the only one who came to Saipan. My wife and daughter are also here. So you know. Tan Xiao couldn't help laughing as he nodded and said, Bring sister-in-law and niece to my place for a drink tonight. All right. Fatty Oldly nodded with a smile. It's a small world. I didn't expect to meet Boss Lee here. My luck is really good. At this time, Wang Rui also noticed Fatty Oldly. After handing over the chips to the casino staff, he greeted them with a smile. Fatty Oldly rolled his eyes and humphed. Don't spout words in front of me, kid. Shouldn't you treat me to a meal since you won so much money tonight? No problem. Let's go play the Seven Goddesses dance later. I guarantee you'll have a good time tonight, said Wang Rui with a smile. Fuck off, bastard. Fatty Oldly cursed with a smile. Look at my body, do you think I can play? Come, let me introduce you. This is the little brother I got to know during the Thai massage today. His surname is Tan Xiao. A glint flashed in Wang Rui's eyes. He didn't look down on Tan Xiao even though he didn't know his identity. He said with a smile, Nice to meet you, Brother Tang. Fatty Oldly has a carefree character. Although his mouth usually talks nonsense, he's very reliable in handling matters. The little brother he introduced must be very good. Brother Wang's means are also very good, said Tanxiu with a smile. Stealing a beam and replacing it with a pillar is superb. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I really wouldn't have thought that the military advisor beside you is just a cover. The real powerful person turned out to be you. Wang Rui's expression changed. He quickly turned his head and glanced around. He found that although many people were observing them, no one could hear Tanxiu's words. Brother Tang, you're also proficient in gambling? I'm sorry. Quiet Knight has to spend time with his wife and child on the weekend, so I can only release 2 chapters normally. But Quiet Knight will move the chapters on the weekend to Monday. Please understand and support me, brothers and sisters. I'll release 2 chapters during the day, and 2 more in the early hours of the night to make up for yesterday's chapters. Chapter 287. I rarely play and have no interest in gambling. Tanxiu shook his head. Actually, I rarely gamble and I don't like it either. Wang Rui said with a smile. But I like the challenge and the feeling of my heartbeat. I've played a lot of those extreme challenges, but I can't solve some personal grudges. You know, the Japanese are very timid. Timid? Tanxiu was disdainful inside. Some of the Japanese people were indeed very timid, but there was also a portion of them who had extreme personalities and were simply audacious to the extreme. Although Tanxiu didn't like this country and its people, he was very clear about one thing. No matter how despicable a nation was, it still had its merits. It was like, this name had a strong sense of hygiene. Fatty Old Li obviously knew a lot about Wang Rui and quickly said, Wang Rui, you brat. Don't lead Brother Tang astray. He's a good little brother. He doesn't like those extreme challenges you play, and he won't seek the feeling of his heartbeat for no reason. Wang Rui shrugged and said with a smile, since Fatty Old Li is so protective of Brother Tang, then forget it. I thought I'd met someone fun. It's lonely being an expert. Tanxiu's expression moved. He looked at Wang Rui, who was about to leave, and said, I can give you a suggestion if you want to find the feeling of your heartbeat. Wang Rui stared blankly as a disdainful look flashed in his eyes. But he still casually asked, what suggestion? I have 2 subordinates. They are both martial arts practitioners and have experienced many battles between experts, said Tanxiu. Your strength is good, so why don't you let them accompany you to play? Let's make it clear first. You're the one who wants to find the feeling of your heartbeat. Don't hold a grudge against me if you get trampled. Wang Rui couldn't help laughing and said, I'll be trampled? The person who can trample me hasn't been born yet. Well, since you're Fatty Old Li's little brother, then I'll give you face and accompany your 2 subordinates to play. Tanxiu told him his villa number and then said, let's meet outside my villa at 12 tonight. Okay. Wang Rui made a gesture and slowly walked outside. Tanxiu keenly noticed that after Wang Rui turned around and left, there were 4 plain-looking men nearby who had steady footsteps quietly following him. The 4 of them didn't seem to want to harm him. Instead, they seemed to be quietly protecting him. Old Li's gaze retracted from the VIP lounge's door as he asked in surprise, Brother Tang, why did you raise this agreement with him? As far as I know, Wang Rui is a martial artist, and it seems that his martial arts are not bad. There was a very powerful character in the Northwest called Yang Xinyu. It was said that he had reached the martial Dao Grand Master realm, and was quite powerful. But I heard that Wang Rui didn't lose to him at all. Yang Xinyu? A strange glint flashed in Tanxiu's eyes. He knew the Northwest's Yang Xinyu. He had seen him in the Rising Dragon Martial School and Star City Chinese Medical Hospital. He had also cured his wife's strange illness. However, he secretly ridiculed in his heart. How could Yang Xianyu's martial arts be compared with Wang Rui's? This guy looked lazy and somewhat out of tune, but his footsteps were steady, and the distance he walked with each step was almost the same. Even when he walked, his posture was in a defensive posture. Such a physical performance showed that he had experienced countless extremely dangerous things. Only those with great strength could display such a state. Yang Xianyu was not Wang Rui's opponent. Perhaps, even if there were 3 to 5 Yang Xianyus, they might not necessarily be able to defeat Wang Rui. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiu and Old Li separated. Outside the casino, they met a sightseeing car and returned to the villa. When he saw Mo On sitting cross-legged on the balcony of the villa's second floor, facing the sea and silently cultivating, he secretly nodded. Diligence. This was the most important attitude of an immortal cultivator. Immortal cultivation was like rowing a boat against the current. If one didn't advance, they would fall back. If Mo On could persevere and constantly improve his strength, maybe one day in the future, he could really reach the immortal realm and step into the void to ascend to the immortal world. Boss, you're back. Mo On keenly heard Tan Xiu's footsteps. After opening his eyes, he immediately stood up and respectfully greeted him. Tan Xiu waved his hand and asked, "Oh, hasn't come back yet?" Mo On forced a smile and said, "Every time he goes to relax, unless he encounters danger, he won't stop for a few hours." Tan Xiu nodded and said, "Then let's not bother about him. It's estimated that the banquet arranged by Tom Reggie will begin soon. You can chat more when you attend the banquet. I may have something else to do and leave early." Mo On was surprised and asked, "Boss, is there something you need me to do? Do you need me to do anything?" Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "You're responsible for eating and drinking well during the banquet. I'll help you find a good opponent at midnight. You can have a fight at that time. I hope you can win." "Enemy?" Mo On asked. "He's not an enemy. He's just a conceited guy," said Tan Xiu. "You don't need to kill him. Just teach him a lesson, and let him know that there's always someone better than you out there. I guarantee to complete the mission." Mo On's spirit shook and he replied in a deep voice. Tan Xiu smiled and said, "You don't need to take the match as a mission. The opponent's strength can't be underestimated. Just take it that you've met his match and sharpen your martial arts strength. I believe that if you can beat him, you'll accumulate a lot of experience in fighting against experts." "My experience is rich enough," Mo On said confidently. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "On, you do have rich combat experience. You've gone through fire and water countless times, and eventually survived. But this is different. What you experienced before was a hail of bullets or easily killing enemies with weak martial strength. But I don't think you've experienced many fights between experts with similar strength, right?" Mo On pondered for a moment and nodded. "You're right, boss. My strength has advanced by leaps and bounds since 7 or 8 years ago, and I've rarely encountered an opponent. Therefore, my strength has been progressing very slowly in the past 7 or 8 years. But ever since old Ji taught me an immortal cultivation technique, the true Qi in my body has undergone a qualitative change and turned into true essence force. Therefore, I can feel that my strength has surged again. My current strength is several times stronger than before. Moreover, I've never encountered an opponent at the same level." Tan Xiu said, "When experts fight, their lives are hanging by a thread. Only then can their potential be stimulated, and they can progress. I don't want to see you fight with your life on the line, but I hope you can comprehend the essence of fighting between experts through the fight." "I understand what you mean, boss," said Mo On. Tan Xiu patted his shoulder and turned to look at the gradually darkening sky outside. A smile outlined on the corner of his mouth, but his eyes were full of chilling intent. Only by going through the bitter hardships could one become a superior person. The path of immortal cultivation was full of thorns and bumps. If one wanted to go further and become stronger, one must fight against the heavens, the earth, and the people. In the past in the immortal world, which outstanding powerhouse didn't step on the corpses of countless people to cast the supreme throne? His words just now were said to Mo On, but wasn't it also for him to hear? The taste of falling from the clouds to the earth was not bad, but he had to endure the pain of losing his strength. One day, he would return to the immortal world to find his enemies and step on their corpses to complete his journey to the immortal world and step into the portal of the gods' world. "All of you must be well and wait for me. Wash your necks and wait. You must be safe and sound before I return to the immortal world." Tan Xiu clenched his fists and blue veins bulged on his arms. That faintly discernible killing intent made Mo On's heart tremble behind him, and he subconsciously took half a step back. Suddenly, Tan Xiu turned around and looked at the cautious Mo On. He pointed to the boundless sea outside and asked in a deep voice, "Can you tell me what you see?" Mo-on thought for a moment and said, "It's the sea." "What else?" Tan Xiu asked. "What else?" Mo-on frowned and his eyes flashed with a look of deep contemplation. Finally, he shook his head and said, "I can't see anything except the sea and the night, boss." "On. Do you know why I'm so optimistic about you?" Tan Xiu said lightly. "Why?" Mo-on's expression moved and asked. "Because you're smart. You know that wisdom is often more fearsome than force," Tan Xiu said. "I once asked Gu Xiaoxue about you and she told me a lot." "I don't understand what you mean, boss," said Mo-on. Tan Xiu said lightly, "I want to tell you that the path of cultivation is not about pursuing power, but also about improving one's state of mind. You and Ao have very strong willpower, but you haven't truly understood what a real cultivator is. I once met a lot of people who blindly pursued power and neglected the cultivation of their state of mind. As a result, they couldn't overcome their inner demons when crossing the tribulation, and finally ended up dying." Mo-on asked, "Boss, you said crossing the tribulation? Is it like in the Xianxia novels?" "There's a difference, but it's not a big one." Tan Xiu nodded. "How can we cultivate our state of mind at the same time, boss?" Mo-on asked again. Tan Xiu shook his head and said, "The cultivation of the state of mind is about perception. I'll explain it to you with the simplest example. For example, I just asked you what you saw from the outside. You said you saw the sea and the sky. But do you know what I saw?" "What did you see?" Mo-on was confused. Tan Xiu said in a deep voice, "I saw the vastness and vastness. I saw the vastness and fusion. I saw the meaning of the existence of the vast sea and the beauty and mystery of the night sky." Mo-on himself was very smart. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's words, he instantly understood and said, "Boss, do you mean to explore and seek knowledge? Thoughts and pursuits?" There are 2 chapters left in the morning. Seeking recommendation votes and monthly votes _. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.